Welcome to the Independent Characters, episode 231.
Getting up there.
Yeah, I am. This is Carl.
This is Josh.
This is Jody.
And we're coming to you today to talk about Legions Imperialis, kind of where it came from, where it's going, maybe.
What it is.
What it is.
What it isn't.
Why it's awesome.
Who it is.
Who it's for.
Where it is. But show sponsored by Brandon Yound and Lucas Christ from our Patreon. Thank you so much for supporting us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you want more information about how you can become a patron of the Independent Characters, just check out our website at theindependentcharacters.com. All the information is there. So we're going to go over Legions Imperialis, but before we do that, let's jump into Elite Choice. You want to go first?
Sure, yeah. I went with Martin Jones and his Tau Crisis suit that he's working on. This is just a really neat paint job of a Crisis suit and some very subtle modifications to how the weapons were mounted. So they're actually kind of underslung under the hands instead of on the back of the hands, which I think just for that kind of mech look, it really does the model justice. It's a really fitting conversion and just an absolute great job on the paint job, really bringing that kind of anime look to life in a way that it's still 40K at the same time. I think it's a head swap.
His edging's on point too.
Yeah, the edging, but also kind of just like that kind of blue neon glow of some of the stripes on there actually has like a non-OSL kind of glowing effect on there. It's not overdone. It's just kind of the right balance. The edge highlighting
it's still warming
incredible.
Up.
Yeah. It's fantastic. And this is the start of a combat patrol, I believe, also. And this friend gave him the kit for these models, and it's one of his favorite models. And he's done an absolute killer job on bringing this to life. And I know Tau don't get a lot of love in 40K in general, but this one was just really well done and stood out to me. Bold colors with that kind of the contrast of the black, the red, and then those blue accent colors for just that really vibrant pop. Just absolutely loved and can't wait to see the rest of this force come to life.
And pulling off that base without getting the model out of balance, that really like intense red balanced off the black with a nice contrast with the light blue. And then somehow all of that like intense contrast on the model doesn't pull away. Cause so often you do a light color base like that, it just blows out the whole model and all you're staring at's the base. It's always a trick with like light colored bases and it looks fantastic there, especially the weathering up onto the feet, tying it all together. I was really surprised at how balanced it looks visually.
Especially for the base being so bright, that kind of orange yellow, very vibrant. But it really, it doesn't fight. It pairs well.
Yeah. There's a lot of like paint theory of like when you're painting something with a face, pulling yellows into the face and blues to draw the eye there, because warmer colors, we tend to look at them more and yet it totally works here. Yeah. It's great. How would get more love if more of them looked like that.
Yeah.
Would they though?
I don't know.
It depends how they play. Actually, I haven't played against Tau in a while.
I haven't played against them in a long time. Yeah. And look, I mean, I probably have some personal bias against them, but I mean, in general, like I love the way they look. I like the Fire Warriors. I think Fire Warriors are one of the coolest looking infantry models. So, but this guy looks really cool. All right, what'd you pick, Jody?
What did I pick? So I went. I don't know.
You took the shell route.
I did, but I would have gone that way anyway. I think I literally commented on it like, man, I would have picked this one. So Jeremy R. Haugen posted a picture of his 15-year-old son and his little brother, the son's little brother, playing with the starter set. The two of them sitting up at the table playing out the starter scenarios. And he says, proud dad, he's helping with painting and assembly, but it's just a picture of the two brothers, the oldest one, 15 and the youngest 7. And they've got their reference sheets out and the transparent range ruler. And, it's the Planet Bowling Ball, kitchen table where I think anybody who started this at a young age, you played that game.
That's how you started.
And that's like, a photo of potentially a foundational memory. And, for me, what turned into a lifetime of gaming and good times it's just cool. Anytime, I think in years past, like anytime you see that where it's the next generation of gamers, the next group coming in. It's just cool to see. And also the proud dad vibes. Like I have a little drawing from my daughter of playing the Lord of the Rings miniature game, and it's she like drew stick figures of like me and dad, and there's like little arrows and a troll.
That's so funny.
And like I have it in all these years later, because it's just like that's just good stuff. So yeah, it was cool to see that shared in the community, and then the next batch coming around. So it's good stuff.
I'm the one who tagged Shell on that one for the Shell's Kiss, but at the same time, like it also really resonated with me, because that's exactly how I got into this hobby. Is my older brother brought home that box of Adeptus Titanicus in like 1990. It was shortly after it had come out, and here I am, 30 plus years later, still playing games because
still playing Adeptus Titanicus.
Still playing Titanicus.
Yeah, my big brother came home with a Grenadier old pewter D&D figure and a bag of weird shaped dice. Yeah. And 30 years later, still playing with goofy dice and miniatures. So that's pretty cool.
Two tangents off of this. One, this is the starter set they're talking about. Did you see they made a made to order Battle for McCrag?
I did see that.
You could buy Battle for McCrag, the miniatures and stuff. It didn't come with the rule book or all that, but the figures and the terrain, the Crash Lander terrain.
Just found mine like recently.
So I've like probably 4 of those terrain kits.
They're awesome.
They were great. Yeah. But when I looked at that, I was like, that's the kit I got started with, 4th edition. And
rookie.
Yeah.
Noob.
For sure. I can't be called a noob anymore because the editions have eclipsed my number by more than
That's true.
2.
Yeah.
So we're at 10 now.
Is that an official metric?
It is now.
It is now.
Canonized today.
But I remember when we bought that, like I thought, oh, these look really cool. And then as I got more models and things progressed, like I recognized where, especially the Marines, were lacking in some of the details because they were push fit at the time. Like even the shoulder pads, like you can see like there's some cheating that they do in the figure. So the shoulder pad just kind of molds into the arm a bit, and it's not like that. It doesn't look like a separate piece. If you look at the latest kits, first off, they are still push to fit in a lot of cases
For the starter sets, yeah.
But you get like the amount of detail you get now compared to when I started this game back then. And that's not even comparing to when you guys started, which was way before me. It's astounding how much the detail has progressed. And we'll talk a little bit about that in regards to like the tanks and stuff. For
the way they
Legions
can cut
Imperialis.
Models up now too, especially with all the CAD design for it. But now how they cut it up so you can get all these like I always think of the Blood Bowl Dark Elves of how they've done these weird like wraparound things.
Oh yeah,
and that kit's still a pain because they've cut it in too many pieces. But just the fact that technology has allowed them to do things and break up models in certain ways, just the detail is incredible.
That's so funny when I think back to 3rd edition. That was the Templars cover, right?
Yes.
And those Marines blowing everybody's mind.
Yeah.
But I don't think those ones weren't push fit.
No.
Those were just the proper, but those were the new Mark 7 at the time.
Were they all plastic?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was funny because you had the Dark Eldar 1st gen that were
Metal.
not great. The plastics that were, and then these Marines that were just mind blowing. Yeah. But then I hadn't really ever thought about that there was a edition that didn't have push fit in the box. Yeah, no, I'm pretty positive.
It's
but
just
it was
fascinating
just another level.
How far they've come sculpting and technology wise. And I had a second tangent, but I lost it. So we'll carry on.
The thing that always gets me now that nobody else does is when you build a new plastic kit, air quotes on new, because they've been doing this for a while, is the way they, like whoever's doing the chopping up thinks about how to hide mold lines.
Yeah.
Like that you don't
It's
have
that
as many,
much thought.
Yeah. That the way the model goes together will, if you just trust the process and do like some basic cleanup, the end product will look surprisingly clean.
Yeah. They're either hidden or placed in such a way that they're going to be easy to clean.
Yeah.
One of the two.
Yeah.
Titanicus, I think, actually does a really good job of hiding mold lines for the most part.
Very much so.
Yeah. As we'll talk about the LI models.
Yeah.
Especially compared to, the old plasma guns. Like those were the worst because they were all ridged.
Yeah.
And you'd have a seam right down
the ridge.
the middle of it.
Come on.
It's like, What do you do? All right.
Turn it into a box.
Anyway, elite choice. I chose Matthias Angner and his Tyranids.
Yeah. I think it's a second call out for this force, but some beautiful additions for it.
Yeah, but I mean the old one eye he did.
Yeah.
Like the striation marks on the carapace are actually like a Tyranid face.
Yeah. That's incredible.
It's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
I don't know if he came up with it or lifted it from somebody else, but it's really impressive and it's really well done. I mean, oh my God. That's really good freehand, actually.
Yeah. It's a beautiful looking force, and that freehand is just absolutely nuts of having.
I didn't even notice it, honestly, until you just said it. Like,
yeah, that's how subtle it is.
Yeah, which is next level.
But it reminded me of like, sometimes you'll see like, oh, this spider's body has like a particular shape on it, or whatever. Sometimes you'll see like hornets or something, and that's kind of what it reminded me of. I thought it was super, super cool.
Yeah.
It's such a good looking force that I was just, it super caught my eye. The colors really catch my eye.
Yeah, it's striking.
Yeah, it's really, really well done.
Yeah, really great balance of light and dark there.
Yep.
With that what is pink, and
Yep.
it's a purpley pink.
Mixed into the
But
blues.
still feeling totally grim, dark,
ice
and
blue and black.
scary movie. And
Yeah.
when you painted your Tyranids in the Waybacks, did you do the little striation marks at the end of the carapace like
Yes.
that?
Yes.
Some tedious stuff. I did it for a while when I had my Tyranids way back when. I did a few of them and I was like, nope.
The more I did it,
direction.
the more I did it, the more cheaty I got at it. And it was just kind of getting a little sloppier with it.
I started with it, and then I think it ended up with a dry brush for my second edition.
that is a
Pretty much.
Like, yeah.
Much like the towel with the clean edging. You better be an edging enthusiast if you
Because there's
go
a
that
lot
route.
of it.
That's a lot
To do it right. Yeah.
Well, and it's that's the thing that I think if you've never done this on the Tyranid carapace, it's multiple passes.
Yes.
Like 3 or 4
of different colors.
of different it looks great.
But man, it really,
And this is next level.
Every,
And-
place, every plate. Yeah.
and I mean, talking about
Bravo.
the freehand, I know like Bryce always jokes, oh, it's just a couple triangles. And then I have this, like I tried to follow this freehand tutorial for painting like a skull one time. And after like 5 attempts at it, I was just like, I'm done. Like clearly I am not cut out for that. And I lack the patience. Like I truly believe that like something like that you can learn.
Yeah.
Like if I were to stick with it, I would eventually hit it and that would be good. But I also have a patience limit I reach that I'm just like, you know what? I'll get a decal.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Time investment to
I could do
satisfaction.
it.
But then
Is
I
it
see
worth the effort.
But then I see something like this and I'm like, oh man, that would be really nice to be able to do. So great work,
Yeah.
Matthias. It looks freaking awesome. All right. So with that, we're going to take a short break and then we're going to come back and we'll go over Workbench hobby progress stuff. Be right back. Hey, we're back, and let's talk a little hobby progress. I'll go ahead and go first. I probably have the least compared to you two. Oh yeah. Anyway, I did finally complete Abaddon.
Yeah.
I'm really happy with the way he came out. Let me back that up. I'm not as happy as I wanted to be with the way he came out, but as we were just talking before the break about patience, like I got to a point where I was just like, you know what? Good enough. It's time for me to move on. Like I'm not trying to win a golden demon here. I'm not going to, I know some of my limitations at the moment. I'm not going to go back and spend more time on this. I spent long enough on him. He's done. I put a salamander on the base. I even did like the fire stuff on his shoulder. And
you got further on shoulders for salamanders than Jeff ever did.
Ouch.
I had him slam from the way back.
I simulated, like, speaking of freehand, I simulated like the salamander on his left shoulder. You only see part of his left shoulder kind of buried in the thing. So I got away with just kind of going, well, it'd be about here and it'd be like this.
Nice,
and
cool. That
you look at it
is
and
just
go-
a couple triangles.
pretty much is.
Once you see it.
Thanks, Bryce. Super happy with the way that came out. And then I ended up sticking a salamander head on his spike as well, just because there's enough red on the model.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go ultramarine, and I didn't want like a trifecta of like red, blue, green. You know,
Yeah.
let's stick with this. And I'm really happy with the way those pieces came out. So, I mean, overall, I learned a lot painting the model because I used, not only did I use some of the Army Painter
The speed paints.
speed paints on parts of it. I used my airbrush on pieces of it. I did some of the tips that Caleb and Kat taught Shell and I on the cloak and stuff. It didn't come out as quite as good as when Caleb did it, but
that's a high standard to compare yourself.
But
to,
it's that's what I'm saying. Like, but it's a good start. It's a good representation. I may go back and touch up his sword a little bit. I saw what I was going for, and then I saw somebody else do his blade specifically, and use some dark blacks in it, and that kind of gave it like a better. I don't even know how to explain it. Anyway, I may go back and touch up the sword, but other than that, I'm done with them. So
can I ask you a question about like when you approach, and it's tougher with a really big centerpiece project like that, but almost any project I approach, I'll think in terms of, and it's not like a conscious, I plan this out and I write myself notes, but it's like background, just dialogue of what am I pushing in terms of like, this is going to be a stretch for me, and what is comfortable, can do this without paying attention. Do you think at all in those terms when you're working on a project?
Yes.
Okay. And it's tougher with a big centerpiece because you want it all to be the very, very best, but that's just not realistic.
It's not, right. It's not, I think that's actually what I was trying to say. It's not realistic for me to think I'm going to do the best on every component of this thing that I can do. I wanted to, but at a certain point I just go, okay, I've achieved a look that I think works there. I'm going to leave it at that. Which is why, again, like it blows my mind, Golden Demon painters who just meticulously spend all this time. And then I took a photo of it and I'm like, that is not what it looks like.
Yeah.
I hate that.
I think that's like, just in terms of a thought exercise, giving yourself permission up front to go, I'm going to try hard on this.
Yeah.
You know, with,
yes.
Abaddon, I always think of like the underglow. Like for me, that would be a spot I'd be like, if I was painting one, I'd want to spend my time there. Yeah. It's the face, and that's just a cool, weird lighting effect. And how do you want to go with it?
I thought about that,
but like the row, his giant cloak, I'd phone that noise in so fast. Like I'd be like, nope, that's not getting much attention.
I've got that down.
Yeah,
like I've got that down now. If I need to go do that again on another model, I can do that again.
Yeah, it's just that thought process. I think is kind of valuable.
I thought about doing the glow effect. Like the problem was, in my eagerness, I had already glued the head in. Yeah. And I should not have done that. I should have kept it separate. Then I could have gone that route. Because that's actually fairly, I think I could get away with that fairly easily. I've got OSL stuff down fairly easily, and that would just be, from the bottom of his head, coming from the interior of the neck. I don't think I'm fine with it not having that.
Yeah, totally.
Like, I think he came out great. I'm happy with that. The next thing, the one other point I wanted to make about that was when I'm doing a centerpiece model or a piece like that, I usually have a plan in my head, like going forward, like, okay, I'm going to do the Marine he's standing on as an Ultramarine. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And that allows me to progress from inside out, right? You want to hit the deepest areas you can first. In this model, I had a plan going in, and then I changed it a little bit, and then I found inspiration on, well, I really want to do the edging now. And it's like, I really shouldn't have done the edging yet, and it was like, so I
you get excited for certain parts and
I got excited,
jump around or jump ahead. And
yeah. And then I'm like, as I would do that piece, I'd be like, oh, now I got to do this real interior piece. Boy, I really should have thought about that. So in some cases I found myself redoing pieces because I would, go over it as I'm slopping stuff on the interior. But overall, like, he fits with my army really well. Dave Roberts from Dave Paints sent over Gilliman for the Table War Charities thing. I put him next to Gilliman. I was like, oh yeah, this looks pretty cool. Like this is all right.
Yeah. Nice.
Speaking of his Gilliman, like, I also saw how he did certain things on it. And I know like what techniques he uses, because he and I have talked about, like, how did you do that metal on this? He's like, oh, this is what I do. And he told me years ago, he uses, like, for his silvers, I don't know if I'm giving away his secrets. I should just shut up.
The dude's cracked the code. So.
I'll tell you guys behind the scenes. I don't want to give away his secrets. He was jokingly saying, anyway, let's just say it's not rocket science. And having seen his Guilliman in person and seeing how he did his trim, I was like, oh, that looks really cool. Like I see it's a different style. Like it's using metallics, but they're dulled way down.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, that looks really cool. Too late for me with Black Legion, but were I to do another army that had a metallic edge.
This was a battle.
Yeah. You know what? That would look really good.
It would.
On Sisters of Battle. So
I call that what you're talking about of having a plan.
Yeah.
The phrase I've used for years is I have it painted in my head.
Oh, I like that.
Like when I approach sometimes I approach a project and I go, it's already painted in my head.
I like
and
that.
then other projects, again, kind of in a weird way of giving myself permission of it's not painted in my head. I'm going to figure it out. Then you just know that you're like, stuff's going to go wrong. The other phrase I use in that is when you're in the like figuring it out, the problem is you don't know where to miss with your paintbrush. Like if you have a plan, you know, like, oh, I can be sloppy here.
Right.
Because I can cover it up later.
Yeah.
Right.
But when you're all over and you're just figuring it out, then every time you miss, you're like, I actually have to like really fix that.
And this is usually how like my test models go for something, right?
That's why
like,
that's so valuable.
Yeah. Yep. Like I'll kind of a rough idea. Well, he's going to be blue and gold and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's just start laying down some paint, see what happens. And okay, it's probably not the best representation of what I can do at that point, but now I have it figured out.
Painted in my head.
Next time, I love that term. Yeah. That's a good one.
That's funny. Actually, the last thing on my my workbench list is a test model.
Oh, so we'll get to that because the other thing I've been working on is my Legions Imperialis stuff.
Yeah, you have.
Josh, I freaking hate you so much.
Wait till you play.
Wait till you play, then you'll love it.
I know I'm going to. Like, I love Titanicus. Like, Titanicus is super fun to play, and playing with you guys makes it super fun. I know I'm going to love this. It was funny, Jody, like you and I were chatting about something else, and then you're like, oh, I see you at least started doing the weapons and stuff on your infantry. Before you arrived, I was talking to Josh. I'm like, I hate doing these infantry. Like,
it's different.
It's
two different animals.
The good thing about it is doesn't take a lot.
Nope.
But it's dull.
It's a lot of tiny detail.
It's dull. And oh my God, my eyes are going cross. Like, it is a lot of detail. It's not a lot of detail. It's a lot of tiny detail. And you know what? It's good though, because you were just talking about Sisters of Battle. Sisters of Battle are a lot smaller than Space Marines.
Yeah.
It's going to be good that I get this practice on small things.
They're going to be a breeze. They're all upscaled and
holy God. Now, painting the tanks is fun.
Yeah.
Oh God.
And it's super fast. Like, it's super easy. So I'm going Sons of Horus. I like the green. The green is the sea green I've chosen. It's worked out very well.
Green, black, silver, done.
Yeah, that's it. Boom. Unlocked.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I've got about I got the base coats all on like the 10 rhinos, 2 of the whatever they're called.
You have Kratos?
The Kratos. Yeah. And then it's funny because I painted one sprue of
paint all 4 of those. They're real good.
Of the Marines. I'm going to of the Marines, and then I finished. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I got all that done. I looked over my shoulder. I'm like, oh, there was a second sprue. I forgot there was a second sprue, and I got to finish assembling the dreadnoughts. But I mean, it goes fairly quick, like as you would expect. I think one of the things that's giving me pressure is looking at your guys' work. Looking at the stuff you've done, looking at the stuff Austin has done, like Austin's looks so good. And I'm just like, oh man, I don't want to put mine on the table and have them look terrible. So I got to work on
that
it.
Scale and distance.
It all gets,
honestly, anything that you're going to put out. And I'm not saying yours is less than at all. Like, it's going to look great, especially when you're looking at it from 3 feet away. Like, it's so small.
It's so tiny. It doesn't
looks
matter.
amazing.
Right.
Like when I was doing the metallics on the pipes on the rhinos, it's just like,
yeah.
Okay, done. Wow, that took 3 strokes and that pipe's done. Okay, cool. But we were talking earlier about detail on models. The detail on these tanks is amazing.
Yeah.
It's not as great on the infantry guys. I mean, it is what it is on the infantry guys, and like the captain with the sword stands out, and the banner guys look cool, but like their legs are, okay. But holy smokes, the vehicles are just, it blows my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how crisp the detail is.
Yeah.
So crisp.
Yep.
was like, if they could upsize these, they'd make some good rhinos for 40K. They look incredible.
And imagine if the 40K rhinos were only in 8 pieces.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, please. Although I can assemble a rhino in like 10 minutes. Right. I'm so fast at it.
Minus the individual tread parts. That's not far off.
Yeah, it is not far off. But holy smokes, they go together really well. They're so tiny. And you know what's interesting? I was giving this a little bit of thought as I was painting them too, because your mind wanders while you're painting this stuff. But when you look at a Hot Wheels car, like let's just take like a Corvette, right? You have a real Corvette. They don't just shrink down the Corvette and they're like, here's a Hot Wheels car. There's actually like, it physically doesn't look right at that scale. Right. They actually like squash it a bit and like stretch it out like to the sides. Like it is not a perfect dimensional representation. I don't know about these. Like, I wonder if at this scale they look different than, again, you're not looking at, I haven't seen a real rhino. Like I've seen the one at Games Workshop, one? Yeah. but that's not a real, it's, sort of a rhino. They're not fitting 10 of those Marines rhino either. Well, so maybe it is a perfect representation. I was going to say,
rhinos are all clown cars anyways. There's no way you're fitting 10 Marines in a rhino.
Either way, the models, the tanks are stunning. And Jody, you're working on a Thunderhawk. I don't want to jump the gun, but let's talk. I'm done. So let's talk about your.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me jump in because we're at a very similar place. So I'm going to go through what I got done, and then I want to go right back to let's talk about the building and assembling of this stuff. So I painted, other than the 2 Warhounds, I painted the entire.
Can't tell you how excited I am that you're painting Titans, by the way.
I'm not. That's what I'm saying.
Damn it. One done.
I have one, base coated. It needs all of
finish.
Anyway, sorry. The Solar Auxilia and the Marine stuff from the starter box, all of that is entirely done. So the 2 starter factions are incredible. Totally finished. I did Ultramarines for the Marine side, and then
they look incredible.
Why
did I've always, not always, I know Mr. like anti-Marine in recent history, but like my way back in the day was a Ultramarine player. And in fact, it was part of my about Marines now is because the Ultramarines were the first one to get and this is Sergeant Ralph of the 3rd Squad of the 2nd Company. And I was like, my story does not fit anymore because I can tell you who this guy is supposed to be.
Right.
Less so now with the updated timeline. That's actually the best thing about the updated timeline is you have room to again, it's new Primaris guy. I can just say whatever the heck I want.
Chuck the Primaris.
So yeah, I've always been an Ultramarine fanboy. Like they
were my first Marine Army too.
Yeah. Men in Black, the best of the best of the best, sir.
When I painted up my Ultramarines initially, it was so funny because everybody's like, oh, they're the poster boys. Everybody does them. I'm like, you don't see them on the table.
Yeah.
You didn't see them and then I brought them to Adepticon and people were like, oh my God, it's actually Ultramarines. There was 4 of us that had Ultramarines painted there. We were all like, hey.
It's interesting at the game Josh and I will talk about that we played. Somebody made the comment of well, if they're the best of the best or whatever, they're the poster boys, how come they're not the best at anything? And I wonder if that's partly why you don't see them as much. And that's actually why I like them is I'm like, no, they're just, this is what Marines do.
Yes.
They're not genetic defects that have some weird hyper specialization.
They're the best at following the Codex Astartes.
Yeah. Well, when you wrote it, it helps. I wrote the rules.
Dad wrote
the rules. And then I did with the intention of blending them to jump back in the Solar Auxilia. I did a riff on one of the kind of Forge World templates there's a Calthian faction that's from, that's anyway, Solar Ox. And it's a mostly gray with blue accents so that if I
know exactly which ones you're talking about,
combine the 2, it'll look cohesive still. And I did the same basing for everything.
In fact, they're in the black original Horus Heresy books that I have.
When I was digging around for reference photos and stuff, sometimes they have really bright yellow components and then sometimes it's just gray and blue and
you don't want bright yellow.
So, well, funny enough, what I was thinking is because detachment designation is kind of a big deal, as we'll talk about in gameplay. What I'll probably do is do another, the next box worth of infantry.
Yeah.
Will have those yellow highlights, whereas the first one didn't. So there'll be some visual separation. I used on the Marines, from Cult of Paint, the YouTube channel. They put out a video that I think did very, very well. I think a lot of people saw it. It was 18 Legions in 18 minutes.
I saw that.
Which is funny because I think the video is a half an hour long. So I'm not sure where the 18 minutes is. And he definitely didn't spend 18 minutes on anything. So I'm like, I don't know where that is, but why not?
It makes it sound more clickbait.
It does. But it goes
Legions
through
in 32 and a half minutes.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's not just
doesn't roll off the tongue the same way.
But it's like the Cybertruck pulling a Porsche. It didn't actually pull it a quarter mile. It pulled it an eighth mile. There's like, but it doesn't sound as cool.
Doesn't sound as good. But it's a great video either way. And it's time stamped for whatever Legion you want to play. Yep. Jump in and you can see a take on it.
That's
and
smart.
I really liked the look of the Ultramarines. And it is a system style of painting where it's you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, end result. Part of the system was oil washes. Thank you. Finally happened. Got the tutorial in, did the oil wash thing. Was in November. So my wife and I have a rule of basically around Thanksgiving time, everybody goes on a buy. Hey, you may not buy yourself anything. So Christmas gifts can be purchased.
Right.
And you don't, I bought myself an Xbox 1 year in that window and that didn't go over well since one had already been purchased.
Oh
yeah. That didn't. Yeah. And thus the rule. So waited, got oil paints for Christmas. Thanks.
Nice.
Thanks, Aaliyah. Man, it does what it says on the tin. It isn't the end all be all panacea answer to everything. But it does do for me, but it works. And 4 Legions Imperialis vehicles,
Especially the vehicles. Yeah.
Oh,
Incredible.
buddy. I don't think I'll use it on my infantry next time.
you went all infantry.
Yeah, I did
too.
Did everything
Probably
at once.
overkill.
And yeah, I think there's a better way to go with infantry. I think just being really mindful about your zenithal priming and frankly, I think brushing on contrast paints, which I've seen plenty of videos of people doing, is a really great way to go.
Yep.
I just don't think there's just not enough depth on an 8mm.
There's not.
Yeah.
To really have it work.
I did base black. I did army painter speed paint. I can't remember the green. I've got it over there. I'll talk about it in a minute. But over the black, and I just did a heavy wash on them.
Yeah.
And then dry brushed a little more green.
Yeah, plan for the desaturation. Like when you put a wash over, it's going to pull the color down.
Yep.
So my guard actually
wanted it to pull my color down.
So my Solar Auxilia, like it's a zenithal prime, and then I was like, I'm going to Nuln Oil black wash, whatever. You know, I also really like the Monument Hobbies black wash, but I was like, I'm going to do that over just a black to white zenithal prime, and then that my gray is done. And so on the vehicles, I just went in and did all the metal work. And then did the wash over everything, and same with the infantry. Pick out all the silver, one wash, and we're pretty close to done.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely, I would say, painting and hobbying on the Solar or the Legions Imperialis stuff. Have a plan, have it painted in your head. You know, just because it is so tiny.
Yeah.
Aaliyah walked in when I was doing the Marine infantry, and she was like, "Wow, that's a lot of little dudes," and I was like, I am very tired of blue right now. And she's like, yeah, I bet. Are you painting their silver pants blue? And I was like, no, I'm painting their blue gun silver. Thank you. And just, put on an excellent podcast on YouTube. And
that's all you can do.
There you go. It's not very, if you can see it, it's not difficult. It's just one stick at a time. So I even paint some on the base, but I'm like, man, paint them on, cut the sprue up so you have a stick of guys and just toop,
down the line.
Yep. It's great. It is great.
It is tedious. Come on. But it's over fairly quick.
Right.
Is my point.
It is monotonous work. It's
monotonous. That's the word I was looking for.
It's the poster child of what I always think of is the Aaron Lovejoy 30 seconds a miniature.
Yeah.
Except it's down to like 5 seconds a miniature.
It takes
5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds. It's literally a brush stroke.
Yeah.
And it is monotonous. I am committed on this in terms of hobby to a buy one, paint one.
I like your plan, man. I'm going to follow your lead.
Yeah. So I finished the box set and then I went, and when I bought my box set, I broke the rule, but from here on out, I've held to it so far, one box out. But I bought a Thunderhawk and I was like, okay, the starter box is done. And now I'm going to do my Thunderhawk. And I built and painted my Thunderhawk and I went, and now I can buy something. I bought a box of Solar Aux infantry. They're primed, they're chopped, primed, and assembled. when that infantry is done, I was able to work out for a second starter, which is something I want to talk about later.
Nice.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, Craig and I worked out a second starter.
Good.
How did the Thunderhawk go together, and what was it? Perfect?
Piece of cake.
Yeah, they're great.
I am blown away by how easy the assembly has been. It is small pieces. It's, if you're brand new, I could see this being very frustrating.
Yeah.
But for plastic kits, like I know what I'm going to do. I've got a set of tweezers for the parts that need tweezers.
You need tweezers.
Yeah.
You need tweezers.
For a few. The smokestacks on the Rhinos, I needed tweezers.
I needed tweezers for those, and the rocket launchers on the Rhino.
The sponsons.
The little tiny one.
What did you put on the Hunter Killer?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I popped one off when I was painting. I was like, oh, come on.
For the
Rhino.
The Rhino kit comes with little Hunter Killers that are a millimeter.
Yeah. Wow.
They're like the size of the cigar in the
Yeah. So a Gundam set of the super pointy tweezers really worth. I mean, the reality is you can buy all in one, and they're usually under like Gundam kits, that style thing. And you get an X-Acto blade, some sanding sticks, a really fine nose tweezer.
That's what you need.
That's what you need. Yeah. I will say one thing I've done that has been really nice is, so on the Ogrin for the Solar Auxilia, they're in 5 parts. There's legs and then a torso and then on arms on each side. What I do is I cut off the chunk of sprue. So there's 2 sets of feet on a chunk of sprue still. And then I just build the guy on that. And then I literally glue the 2 sprues together.
Oh yeah.
I sand that and just plastic cement the 2 pieces of sprue. So I have a stick with all 4 Ogrin on it.
Smart.
And I did that for some of the plasma gunners in the Marine sprue. So it was like get likes with likes, so that when I'm doing
there's a few OSO. When you get to the jump infantry, there are a couple of the jump infantry that are like 3-sided surrounded on the sprue. So I would clip off the jump pack. One of those pieces of sprue anchors to the jump pack. So if you clip that out to at least give you space for your paint to get in there, and then you don't have to go and clean up something after you've already painted and done all your on sprue paint work. That's the one recommendation.
If you're going to glue sprue to sprue, like I'm doing to make bigger sprue sticks, you don't need to do it for the like 5 bolt gun Marines. Like don't bother, but like the weird one-offs, like the jump back guy. And use your sanding stick or sandpaper, sand it just a little bit. It's like an old ceramics trick of like you burnish it and then put your plastic cement on and give it a little rub. You'll feel it. It'll lock in tight, almost like super glue. It'll and it's literally that burring. It increases the melting and
the scoring of it helps.
Yeah. And you're just sanding sprue. So you get a nice clean fit. Anyway. And then also, Josh, you mentioned this, I think last episode, working on the 3D new order tokens. Realized I did the combining all the pieces because I used the same file. Well, you gave me the files. I found out Lychee actually has a built-in, if you go to Pro, there's a built-in combining option that I didn't know about. So it's real easy there. Didn't have to learn Blender, which I'm trying to fight, trying not to learn Blender. But yeah, I also messed up when it comes to 3D printing and resin, the like scary learning curve is more about learning the software than it is. I feel like there's less mechanical frustration with a resin printer than there is with a PLA printer. But there's way more on the software end of figuring out how to position things. For sure. So I built a build plate and then realized if I had just done 5 separate builds of the tokens rather than one build that had everything.
I did the same thing.
I would have been way better off. And I was like, I'm going to have to print like 10 of these, or I could print 5 of, okay, well, scrap it and redo it. Yeah. So
after I printed all mine, I was like, oh, I need way more advance orders. And I think I'm good on everything else. So I need to do a second print run of just advance orders.
Yeah. So I printed 2 and was like, stop, time out. I'm going to have to do like 15 of this print, or I could do 5 and be done. So yeah, I got to go that route. I think that's everything on Legions Imperialis. And then I mentioned I did a test model. My Iron Warrior Havocs for my combat patrol, reconnected with Cliff over in Santa Cruz. He's been slowly but steadily grinding away on the Marines as salamanders. He just did some awesome freehand flames on his salamanders.
Awesome.
That is one thing I can freehand. Flames.
Yeah. It was his first time ever doing it, and he was like, "Well, those turned out pretty good. It's way better than I thought."
Super easy.
Yeah, and he made them look great. So I did my Iron Warrior Havoc. I am curious to see the what Dave Paints is doing, because I have my own little system of how I do metals and the gold trim, and
we'll talk about it after.
Yeah. But got that all dialed in, and it's ready to go. So now it's just a matter of the funny part was I didn't write down how I did the first batch. And so I was looking at the ironwares
deconstructed in your head now.
Yeah, the end of whenever I was doing them way back when. And I was like, what the heck did I do there? And then got through this test model. I was like, now I remember. It's not what I just did, but close enough. Cool.
The muscle memory comes back.
Yeah, but very, very excited to get back to slowly but steadily chipping away and build out that combat patrol. Had hoped Adepticon would be my motivation, but
turns out no.
There's no combat patrol events. There were
interesting.
Surprisingly,
very few other than the tournaments. Lots of tournament options. Not much beyond that for 40K, which was a little disappointing.
I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, there weren't like there's a narrative event, and there's again friendly tournament, competitive tournament, like,
but there's not a narrative.
There's not that I saw, not in this.
There is,
I don't know. It just would have been nice to see some smaller events.
Yeah.
So hopefully I will have I should have my kill team or my combat patrol, done by then. So I'll have it with me.
Yeah.
Just because I think that's still for pickup games is tough to beat.
Yeah.
But that's my goal, is to have that combat patrol finished.
Did you guys get into the Space Hulk thing, or what's going on there?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay.
I thought I saw one of you had reached out to the guy.
I reached out to Troy, and he does have a couple slots for Saturday, but not enough for the full group. So,
we won't have
we won't have the full
IC
crew
pod
there, but there's potential for a second one. They have some friends from out of town coming and doing that, so they're already running that extra game.
Extra one, yeah.
So they had 2 slots. So me and Jody will sneak into that one, unless somebody like in our group that hasn't been able to play, I'll give my slot up to that. Like Craig, if Craig if he didn't get anything, I'll give him my slot. So
we were able to. It sounds like people were able to get in bits and bobs, but not
that's typical.
One big gang.
It's become so popular.
A lot of those were sold out before registration opened. A couple of them just from like Geek Nation Tours gives you the early access, and I think a lot of people went right for that one.
I think we should have shut up about it.
Why did we do an episode on how awesome it is?
I need to get motivated to come back and work on my old Terminators to add to my set. Because every year it's been, I come back and
immediately
start painting up Terminators again.
Terminators are fun to paint, though.
They are.
Yep.
I like Terminators and Primaris. I think that's like just there's something about that scale that I just it rocks for me.
If I didn't already have like 3 or 4 squads for my Space Hulk set, because that's all I have, they're like bespoke to play Space Hulk with, I would be very tempted to get those new Primaris ones. Those models they're really nice.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah. They look scary on the table, and
I like the new Chaos Terminators. Like, they came out great. So
did they scale those up as well?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Not quite as much,
but nice.
They're bigger.
Cool. I think that's me on hobby progress.
Josh.
Not to sound like a broken record here, but
Legions
Imperialis. So I have my 2,000 point list is fully painted, ready to go. And this is all the infantry, a ton of tanks, a single Reaver Titan is in that, and then a couple of the planes I had from Imerialis, Aeronautica, that is. I think I have 3 planes in a 2,000 point list, and I think that's kind of the sweet spot of balance for me from the games that I've seen so far.
Interesting.
Obviously, I have like 11 planes, so I can bring more in later on, but I think I'll save those for bigger games.
I have a bunch of Eldar planes.
Yeah. You still play Aeronautica. You got orc planes now too.
I know. Merry Christmas.
So that was my big push the Adepticon event is 2,000 points, and just for any pickup games I go and play there, I would love to have just the 2,000 point list ready to go. The stretch list, there is an option to play 3,000 points, which I don't think people being so new to the game are going to be able to have those large of games in the time frame given at Adepticon. We'll see how the next 2 months go for just getting repetitions in for games, because 3,000 points it's a big game. It's a full table. But my stretch to get to 3,000 points is, I think it's like 10 infantry bases and 9 tanks. So pretty small, and I'll definitely have that ready to go, and I'll take it just in case. But I think 3. Well, as we'll get into, I think 2,000 points is kind of the sweet spot for the game.
All right. Yeah, I got to get my 2K dialed in. And funny enough, it's going to have, as we'll also talk about, it's going to have more to do with availability than what I air quotes want to play.
Yeah.
Which is kind of weird. I might have to get that Titan done.
Weren't they just?
It's close.
I thought I saw the boxes of Rhino or Predators were coming out, and
Predators and Sicaran have been announced. I'm not sure when the release for those is happening for the sub, and that is the hardest thing to find right now. Are those starter set tanks?
So the Kratos are carrying everything on their back at the moment.
Kratos carry a lot.
On so many levels.
We'll get into Kratos, but they're awesome. So lots of Legions Imperialis being painted there. Also been working on terrain. I'd already 3D printed a bunch of stuff. But now I have taken that and actually applied some bases and added extra kind of rubbly goop onto those. And then in addition to that, so we had a coarse gel medium applied onto the 3D prints, and then I just use a plastic hard base to just kind of build those up a little bit and give them more of a area terrain effect, but also just to make it look more like it's a destroyed building or rubble, things like that. As we'll get into when we talk about the game more, types of terrain I think are also very important, and having a varied type of terrain. So it's not all just intact buildings and things like that. Like you want some area terrain, you want some ruins, you want some forests, things like that. So been working on that, and I'll have lots of terrain to paint up in the next couple weeks here. And then just a couple quick purchases. I've got the Taros Venator, which is the Enforcer Ash Waste vehicle, the old with the Elysian drop Taros vehicle, which I've always loved the look of that dune buggy, and I think in Ash Waste it's super fitting. It's I think it's a great looking model. I'm very excited to paint that as soon as I can get my hands on some of the Sanctioner Enforcer Automata, which is kind of the Enforcer specific Ambot style dudes. I'm gonna do those that cool and the Venator as a group. They've been out of stock for so long that I haven't been able to get my hands on them yet, but as soon as I do, I'll do those 3 models as a batch, and that's the end of that gang. That gang will be done and ready for the Ash Waste.
All right.
So very excited for that. And then lastly, I also did get the Striking Scorpions out of the new box set, the Kill Team box set. I just split that with Craig and got the Scorpions out of it. So
very nice.
Very excited.
How many was that?
It's 10, and it's enough to make two X-Arcs also. So you can either do it 2 squads of 5 or 1 big squad of 10.
What are you doing? 2 squads of 5?
I'll probably do 2 5s.
Yeah.
Just because of the way they infiltrate,
how they
and
look,
scout, and they're gorgeous.
They're all assembled?
No, I haven't. They're still on sprue, but
okay.
I was definitely just pouring over that sprue, looking at it, and like it's cool. Yeah.
I'm so excited those are in plastic.
Yeah. So at this point, I have everything I need for my Elder list. I am hoping that we'll get plastic warp spiders when the Codex drops, and that should be the only thing I need.
That would be amazing.
That'll be kind of icing on the cake for me, but very excited to jump into that project.
They could make
sooner
some
than later,
really cool looking warp spiders in plastic too.
Yeah.
Those are long overdue for an update. I mean, when I just saw like LVO and they're like, "Oh, Kroot," and I'm like, okay. But the Eldar still...
They're saving it for the Codex.
I think so. I think so. And that's okay.
Because there's not a lot. Like Fire Dragons, I don't think really need a change. Even if they put them in plastic, they can look identical and be fine. Sweeping Hawks, if they just make those plastic and a little bit more like fine detail and kind of even a little bit more spindly in plastic would be cool. And then Warp Spiders would be...
Speaking of other units, people don't
Warp
use
Spiders.
Sweeping Hawks.
Yeah.
Forever, man.
They used to be great.
Yeah.
They had their brief window.
Yeah. There was a time.
Yeah, those warp spiders were old when you started.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. A lot of
hard
those
to believe
predate
those
me.
I wonder if those are the oldest right now. They
might
have
be
to be
up there.
They have to be.
Yeah.
Man,
we got 10 of them painted already, so it's like
and they still look pretty.
And they still look good.
They're just metal and like
ka-chomp.
I definitely don't want them in fine cast, and I'm pretty sure they're going to be released in plastic when the new Codex drops.
Nobody wants them in fine cast, let's be honest.
Nobody wants blank fine cast.
Especially any spindly stuff, though. Like Eldar also, and the
when I was doing
power
Death
blades
Guard, I was like,
that.
fine cast looks fine. I don't understand
It's
why
all
people are
big,
upset
chunky
about.
stuff.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. Games played. Let's launch into that. I haven't played any 40K recently. Aaron keeps threatening to come over here and play his Grey Knight so he can prepare for Adepticon that he's in like the team tournament with Adon or the doubles or something with Adon.
Oh yeah, he's probably Curious if he's doing the actual team tournament.
No, it's not the 4-person team.
The
tournament.
long war doubles.
I think it's the long war doubles.
What me and Cheyenne are also doing.
Yeah. And he's threatening to come over here and learn how to play them, and then, not having time to come over and play them. So
you got a couple months.
I'm ready to play. So I have not played anything, done a lot of board games.
I will say I am waiting for the points drop, the points update, which I think they're going to do some post LVO analysis this weekend. And then
that'll hit between January and March. And
I think the update is supposed to come at the end of the month. So I'm thinking the next 2 weeks we'll have points updates, and that should lock everything in for Adepticon. So once we have that, I'm going to make my final list for 40K.
I'm so glad I don't worry about that. I'll be honest. So our last episode, we had 2 great guests on to talk about how tournament play went.
Yeah.
And I was just like, it's so interesting how they're almost speaking a different language.
Yes.
And you're like,
same game, very different way to play
same game, just an extremely different way of playing it. Yeah. And more power to those people who play it that way. LVO is going on this coming weekend. And I'm like, cool. It's just not, I have a hard time getting excited about that. Mm-hmm. It feels more stress inducing to me than exciting.
Which isn't, so this is what I'm saying is that I actually have to wait for this tournament to happen because the results of that are going to affect the list that I'm taking in a friendly event to Adepticon in March, but points are going to be updated again until that.
Yeah.
So once this change will happen, then everything's locked in for the next 3 months or whatever, which will keep me covered. But it was like, my list right now is that I really want to take is 15 points over, but I have a feeling in 2 weeks it's going to change, and I don't really want to start painting anything until I have it locked in and dialed. So,
years ago,
which is weird.
Makes sense.
Or not that long ago, I should say, Matt threw a phrase at me that I don't know that I'd really heard before. Apparently it's fairly common of a lifestyle hobby. Yeah. That you go, I have this lifestyle hobby where it's like the hobby is involved enough that it becomes a lifestyle. And certainly 40K and Games Workshop gaming under their umbrella, they have created a space where it can be a lifestyle hobby. I think for me,
that's like.
I wonder what that's like. But the tournament gaming aspect in and of itself, that for me was the I just don't want to go there for that part of the hobby. Yeah. I don't want chasing the meta, which is, I feel like unfortunately has negative connotations, and I don't feel that way about it, but I don't want it. I don't want anybody to think I'm saying it in a negative way.
Yeah, no, I think that's important.
Is that
it's fine.
The tournament play and chasing the meta and watch and on the points watch, and that in and of itself, just that part becomes a lifestyle hobby. Yes. And that for me was
it consumes a certain amount of your time for whatever hobby you're doing.
Right.
That's a really interesting point.
And as somebody who is, a poly hobbyist, that we all love our board games. I love my role-playing games. Mm-hmm. I love my miniatures time. I really love my miniatures time. I love my painting time. All the 3D printing. I can't justify being that dedicated to one facet of it. Yeah. Respect the heck out of and love hearing from the people who really get it. And, what are the wound rates out of this unit versus T4 versus T5 versus 10 wound or less versus that level of thinking is it's fascinating. But I'm like, man, and in 9th edition and 8th and 9th, the stratagem game, I was like, man, the core game and the stratagem game that thankfully has been dialed back
significantly.
It started feeling that way of just to play the game, I have to do all this away the table. Which is partly why I'm so high on Combat Patrol is it is not.
Yeah.
We have gone arguably too far the other direction. But that tournament mindset and not even just the playing your best game, but then the meta chase is fascinating. But also I'm that's for me, that is why it's I just can't go there.
It's the same reason.
Too much of a lifestyle.
It's the same reason Magic the Gathering doesn't appeal to me. It's the exact same reason. We played at Geekin that we did. We played the 40K Magic the Gathering, and I quickly became the last time I played Magic was 20 years ago, and I was like, this is a completely different game terminology. And I just in order for the amount of time I would have had to expend to catch up to where people were, I felt I don't want to chase this down. I got other things I'd rather be doing. And so, I think that's
Magic's a great example of a lifestyle hobby.
Look, my brother-in-law put himself through college playing Magic the Gathering professionally. Right.
Yeah.
Then he went on to work at Wizards of the Coast for a while.
Yeah.
And, he ran a website about it. He talked about it all the time. And, you know, his hobby it was a lifestyle hobby.
Yeah.
And for some folks, that's amazing. And that's where the juice is at. And enjoy it, man. Love what you love. Just for me, in my varied interests, it's, you know,
it was just, it really hit home for me after the interviews. I was like, we're speaking different.
Yeah.
Like we're just enough that like I can speak just enough of what you're saying that I can.
It's the same letters. But the sentences are.
I took Duolingo Spanish and I Duolingo 40K and I can just get what you're
just track what you're going through. I'm going to jump in on games played because we're going to end at the same place.
Let's get on.
So still playing lots of Blitz Bowl and RPGs, less Blitz Bowl because Matt and I are sharing a work life. Yeah. And so it's cut into the Blitz Bowl and the podcasting, but still love it, still playing it, still following it. See painting and hobbying. Like, it's funny because like I'll come and be like, that's all the hobby I've done. And I'm like, no, I've painted like a box of things and all this other stuff
every
on top of
that's ever been released.
Well, and for role-playing games, like every month I'm painting up a whole bunch of new stuff. So it's still always going on. But for Legions Imperialis, Josh, you mentioned last time we played the 2 small games. I really want to hammer home of your first time learning the game, go that route, even though it's going to be like, it's going to be lopsided.
Go which route? The smaller game.
Game. Yeah. The alternating activation, it will go doubly quick, which we'll talk about in a minute. But yeah, really, I encourage folks to fight the urge to go all in right out.
Dip your toe in.
Yeah. Learn the basics. And I just, this is both me as a gamer, but it's also me as a teacher going, there is literally education and learning theory around it is better to learn a little bit and add on than try and learn all at once. Like that is not how we learn.
That's certainly how I learned 10th ed 40K. It was like, no, let's play without, stratagems and let's just, okay. And then let's play.
Right.
That's where I think the,
Combat Patrol
starter set for 40K back and forth edition, the
Battle for
McCrag did a great job of like walking you through,
and they have
that had all the missions in the book,
and they've gotten better at it since then too.
Yeah,
more on that later.
I think they have.
But that one was particularly good at you have never seen one of these before, and with all my Blitz Bowl playing and getting to do play testing, like it is a product custom bespoke for you have never seen a miniature before. How do we teach you how to do this?
Yeah.
Which can be tough for people who've played it for a long time.
Yeah.
That, and I think that's true of 40K too, that like, oh, well, I've been playing 40K for 20 plus years. So the new edition comes out. So I'm going to get out my 3,000 point army and rock and roll. Nope. Fight that urge. Nope. Just fight that urge. Like play a small game. No way I would understand the Solar Auxilia if my first experience playing them had been a 3,000 point game.
Yeah.
Oh my
God. Yeah. Because they play wildly different than the Space Marines.
That's good. They really know, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So speaking of a 3,000 point game.
So after a couple small games, we jumped into a very large 3,500 point game.
Wow.
Team game. So me and Jody were on one side against Sky, Ivan, and Craig down at Herrick Games last weekend. Which no better way to say it than it was an epic game. Like in all the levels, all the ways, all the puns. It was huge. It was a full 4x6 table. Most of the game standard size is recommended at 3,000 points is the quote standard size. So we were just slightly over that. We played on a 4x6 instead of 4x5. But there was a ton of stuff. With alternating activations and
I was gonna say that's got a slow
new players
way down.
and that many players, it was a slow game.
Yeah,
definitely too big of a game for a team game that way, but it was still a lot of fun at the same time.
And I would say like the team game is always fun for just hanging out with your buddies, and because Legions Imperialis has alternating activation, the team game is a tougher ask.
Yeah,
a team game in 40K is slow enough as it is,
right?
Because there's so much back and forth discussion about what you're doing. Blah, blah. With alternating activation, it's like a whole nother level.
Right, because there is no stopping. No. So it creates stops that aren't there.
Yeah.
Whereas in a team game especially if you're comfortable playing team games of 40K, while you and your partner are taking a full turn, we can be talking about, okay, here's what
exactly.
And then when you don't have our turn, we just jump in. And in theory, you could go even, when you get good at it, you can actually play faster because you're both moving all the things at once.
Right.
And, I mean, that's a long time before you get there.
Yeah.
But yeah, that is not the case with Legions Imperialis. In fact, I would be happy to play a team game again. Absolutely.
But that's not where its strength is.
I wouldn't do it as a pickup game.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, it would be like, I'm going to go down to the shop and my day is going to be playing this team game.
We're going to make an event of it.
If it was, because we walked in and it was like, let's learn and start the game. And we were like, let's play a team game. Sure, it sounds great. And a few hours in, I was like,
oh, this was a bad idea.
We literally could have finished 3 or 4 full games had we not done this.
How long do you, well, we'll talk about it in game. So anyway, go ahead.
That all said, because that sounds kind of negative. It was super fun.
It was super fun.
Intensely enjoyable. Some great moments.
Yeah, some really cool moments. I'd say the highlight of that game was probably the infantry completely surrounding a Reaver Titan and taking it down.
That's awesome.
Barely, but did, which was a pretty cool thing. And some just smart little tactical ploys. I've definitely learned a lot in just the 4 games I've played now of little tactical things of what like what you want to do. Like they had a unit of 6 Kratos tanks, which we'll get into these in more detail, but Kratos tanks are insanely good, really good Marine tanks. They just have all the guns. Whatever they point out is probably going to die.
How are they loading those out? Just out of curiosity. Those ones that kill everything. How are they loading those out?
Sponsons don't matter as much.
Yeah.
Having some point defense for taking out dudes is good.
Yeah.
But las cannons are going to be better against vehicles.
Of course.
Because heavy bolters can't hurt vehicles. The las cannons as the hull mounted weapons, I think is probably the way to go.
Okay.
Because they're accurate, so you get rerolls, you get 2 shots, and they're very likely to hit. And then the big gun.
It's a Kratos battle cannon.
Is
that what it's called?
I think it's battle cannon.
I did 2 with the battle cannons and 2 with the.
So the Meltas are really good too because they're one of the only things in the base game right now that can actually destroy buildings, which is kind of
reliably.
Important, with any kind of
guys going into buildings, it's pretty helpful.
Yeah. But even that we learned, like deployment wise,
still
where are the buildings and which ones are you going to want to blow up? Because if you didn't know, you can blow up buildings in Legions Imperialis. Which didn't happen, but doggone, I wish it would have, because our day would have been very different. There was a rhino rush right up the center, and it just like was a spear right into the center of our line, and then it just blunted our advance the whole way.
That's awesome. So that game, actually, the thing I learned the most out of that game is tactically how to deploy in certain ways, of how you want just assets like deployed across the board, knowing what is going to happen throughout the course of a game. And then some little counter tactics I was just alluding to, like they had a unit of 6 Kratos tanks. So whatever this unit was going to fire at is going to die. So I charged them with a unit of rhinos.
1 unit of 6 Kratos.
Yes. Yeah. So I charged them with a unit of rhinos that had already dumped out my tactical Marines on the objective. So these were just kind of like
blunting, like holding them off.
Yeah. But because their vehicles are the same scale, I was able to engage and pin them in. So they ended up using their activation to overwatch on my rhinos, which they ended up killing the rhinos, which is fine. But that means that unit of 6 Kratos isn't doing anything that turn, which was like, oh, okay, that was just a cool kind of tactical thing to put together. Of like, these are a blade of rhinos at this point. They're shield. Let me go.
It's the rhino speed bump, not the rhino rush.
Yeah, exactly. Let me throw them at the biggest unit that they have and just tie them up for a turn.
Interesting.
And it worked well. So
our opening turn, we basically spent killing opposing rhinos, because if we didn't, they were just going to be in the way.
Yeah. Right.
We had to get them out of the way.
Yeah. Once they drop their guys off, they're just they become a speed bump or a shield wall or something like that.
Interesting.
But it's a cool, just tactical kind of thing that happens. So
yeah, I will say, and I don't know if this is getting too far out ahead of ourselves, but I really enjoy the way you end up talking about a game of Legions Imperialis is very different than the way you would talk about a game of 40K. In 40K, I think, and mileage of course will vary, but like you end up talking about units, like, oh, and then my striking scorpions, and then my bloodletters, and then your terminators. That's kind of the conversation of a game, is what did these units do versus these. I find when I'm thinking about and talking about Legions Imperialis, even during the game, it's now on this flank.
Yeah.
Okay, now down the center. Now what is our counter going? Like you're thinking, it's not quite, but like at a moving up towards a strategic level instead of little tactical, then these guys, it's not about, it's really about the
battlefield overview versus unit to unit.
Yeah. And it's neat that it creates that difference.
I think it accomplishes what it set out to do.
Yeah, a battlefield view. And as we'll get into here right about now, the old versions had that as well.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So what we're going to do, we're going to take a short break. Then we're going to come back. We're going to start talking about Legion, not necessarily Legions Imperialis, but Epic and Epic Armageddon and kind of where Legions Imperialis got its start. So we'll be right back. Hey, we're back again.
Here we are.
Yeah, we are. Awesome. So we're going to, before we start talking about Legions Imperialis more than we already have, I want to talk about where it kind of came from, because the games that it originated from, the thinking in it's really another iteration of one of these games, several games.
Yeah.
I should say. I was just not interested in. When I was first looking at miniature wargaming, and it was quite frankly just not where I could spend my money. You know, I was looking at the fantasy stuff because I was a big Dungeons and Dragons player.
Right. Yep.
I think I played one game of Warhammer 40,000 with some friends at the time, but it was like second edition. And it just, I didn't have the stuff. I didn't really know. I was like, it's something to kill an afternoon. We were just goofing off. So I would look at the cost of things. And I'd be like, this is you want how much for skeletons? And they're plastic, at the time, like we were all buying
right.
miniatures.
I forgot about that.
And you remember locally, there was a shop called D&J Hobby.
Yep.
Okay. And man, back in the day, like it was amazing. This was all before miniatures just weren't as prevalent as they are now. And you would go and they would have all these Reaper miniatures in a cabinet. And there was like one miniature per little section. You had a number under the miniature, and okay, I want that one. You write down the number. Mm-hmm. Okay, and I want this one. And you could actually look at it. That was for a nerd growing up in the 70s, 80s, playing Dungeons and Dragons. That was like the pinnacle of, oh my gosh, I would really like to do this. And I remember when I came back from the military and I was still playing D&D, and I was making, money. I had some money to spend, and I went to D&J and I bought like 50, 60 miniatures from the cabinet. And I was just like, it was so exciting. None of them were ever painted.
Back then, no, it wasn't a norm.
Yeah. And so that was the first time I saw kind of like Adeptus Titanicus. Or I think it was just called Titanicus at the time.
It was still Adeptus Titanicus.
It was still Adeptus Titanicus and Epic Armageddon at the time. And I would see these boxes and I'd be like, yeah, this is just not my cup of tea. It's like not what I'm doing at the moment. I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons, Cyberpunk, Call of Cthulhu, those kinds of things. So to delve into this for me was kind of interesting. Now, the two of you both played many of these games, so we will talk about that.
Yeah.
But let's start about like first edition. It's kind of released in, there's two rule sets that come out, Adeptus Titanicus and Space Marine. And these combined kind of make what we would think of as Epic at the time. Did you play first edition? Did you play first edition Adeptus Titanicus?
I did, yeah.
You did.
Yep.
And so that first set came with like 6 plastic Titan models.
Yep. All warlords. They're teeny tiny. These things are probably 2.5 inches tall.
But they don't look like the warlords
no,
we get now. They look like the
turtles. Closer to Reavers.
Yeah. And Space Marine included. Oh, and the other thing it had was styrofoam buildings.
Yep.
And Space Marine came with folded cardstock buildings and styrene roofs alongside sprues of infantry and vehicles.
Yeah.
But you only were playing the Adeptus Titanicus piece of this.
Yeah, so I played Adeptus Titanicus, and then as we'll get into shortly after, they came out with Titan Legions, which started kind of, I think, blurring the lines a bit more of Space Marine and Titanicus together.
Okay, so that was second edition.
Yeah.
So the first one was 1989. Yeah. And it's so funny. I kind of place everything in terms of like, here's when I graduated high school. Here's when I got out of the Army. 1989, I'm out of high school. Like I graduated 88. That tells you how old I am. 53. 88, 89, I'm in the Army. So none of this is even on my radar at that point. I come back from the military in 92. So this is when I start to see second edition of the 2 rule sets again, Space Marine and Titan Legions.
Yeah.
Right.
And now you say this is where it's kind of blurring the line.
Yeah. So Titan Legions introduce more of the smaller things, not just some of the bigger things too, like the Imperator Titan and the giant.
That's what it was
Gargants.
notable for, was the Imperator Titan.
So I came in on Space Marine 2nd edition.
Yeah.
That's when I got in, was 91. Because same sort of thinking, this was mid-high school for me. And this was when I really went, like, really attached to GW was very early 90s. And it's funny because I remember Titan Legion coming out right as I was getting out of high school and being like, neat, but I'm kind of moving on to other things.
Yeah. So let's just quickly, Space Marine box game included 3 armies. That's kind of unique. Space Marines with their Land Raiders and Rhinos, Orcs with their battle wagons, and Eldar with their Falcon grav tanks.
Yep.
Titan Legions was notable, as you said, for introducing the Imperator class or Imperial Emperor class Imperator Titan and the Orc Mega Gargants.
The Mega Gargant and Knights, the first appearance of Knights in miniature format.
Yeah. It also contained Imperial Knights.
First said they had them as metal.
Yes.
Yeah.
Imperial Knights and 12 Orc battle wagons.
Yeah. That were like totally customizable.
Yeah.
Like you could change out.
You can actually snap on and they all had def rollers and
or not,
that's
or the
cool.
like kill dozers or
So
they were really
it's a cool kit.
Okay, so you're playing this time, but you're kind of leaning out of it. Jody, you're leaning out of it. Josh,
So Titan Legions, were you playing Titan Legions still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Still.
So I had my like, I really got into Space Marine 2nd edition.
Okay.
Because there were a bunch of supplements that made for it.
Okay.
And yeah, this was, and funny enough, it had to do with similarly a financial thing, because you could buy box sets and it would say like Space Marine Legion, and they advertised like over 150 models in the box,
Which is what they do now.
Right.
120 models.
but it was like at the time it was like $20.
This big.
Yeah.
So I, as a high school kid, I was like, man, I don't have, and I kept seeing these little boxes and I was like, this actually looks kind of cool. So I saved up and I bought the starter and fell in love with the rules.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Like I remember that's what actually hooked me was I was like, it seemed like a better value, like bang for my buck.
Sure.
And then read the rules and was like, just fell in love with that rule system. That was 2nd edition. And it, like I said, time-wise, I probably would have kept playing Titan Legions when they scaled up, because I actually really liked those Titan rules where you had data cards and you rolled these goofy dice on them to see where you hit them. It was neat. But like I said, I was graduating high school, and like so many people, you graduate high school and you either fall away from it,
Right.
And for me, it's just, I just redesigned like where I was spending my hobby time.
Who were you playing with?
So I was up in, was up in NorCal.
Yeah.
This was before Anthony and I started hanging out a lot. We knew each other from school, but I actually don't think we knew each other were gamers until right after he graduated. So it was just before that. And it was just guys at the local game shop.
Okay.
And I was the guy who like bought it, painted up both sides, and then would be like, hey, let me show you this really cool game.
Yeah.
And then found a couple other folks that would play it with me, and they got into it too. So it was
So
just
you kind of drove that game group.
that's always been my like little niches. I'm like, if I think this game's cool, that means I'm painting 2 factions.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I've always done that. It's,
Jody is a
brain.
gateway drug.
Yeah. Yes.
And what about you? Who are you playing with, Josh?
Primarily my older brother. There was a local shop that had a couple people also playing there. And then I also got a couple good friends into it, introduced them to the hobby. And especially when the box set, the Space Marine 2nd edition dropped and it had 3 armies. I was mostly playing Eldar for that, Eldar and Marines. And then my brother was mostly playing the Orcs.
And so for both of you, was it you picked up the rule set and learned it yourself, or did somebody else played with it? Because a lot of times, like Adeptus Titanicus, the current version, Josh, I read the rules, and I've said infamously many times, they read like stereo instructions. But once I played the game and you kind of walked me through, I was like, oh, got it. Super, super easy. Right.
Yep.
But you kind of picked it up, learned it yourself. And
So my brother, because my childhood friend worked for Chaosium, he was in the publishing industry for role playing games. Right. My brother, being a couple years older than me, used to go with him to Gen Con almost or at least a couple times, not every year, but he went several times, and my brother would always bring cool stuff back that he found at Gen Con, mostly miniature related. So that's where he picked up Titanicus. That's where he picked up Titan Legions. And then he and I would kind of figure it out and play together.
Okay.
After the fact.
So yeah, I learned it. This is the first GW game I remember like really teaching myself, because I had to have other dudes at the shop teach me 40K at this time.
Yeah.
But I picked this up and was like, this totally makes sense. I get it. And the one thing that I'd forgotten, frankly, until we're talking right now, I was able to get people who wouldn't play 40K or other games, they would play this and enjoyed it.
Interesting.
It doesn't play like any other GW game. Right. It is noticeably different.
Yes.
It's just very,
and it's also the old rules and the current ones. If you have that lens, there's a tactile way to you interact with building an army and how things resolve that's way less intimidating.
Interesting.
So,
okay. So 1997 rolls around. I'm 5 years out of the military. I think I'm living in Southern California. Yeah, I'm in Southern California at this point. So I'm kind of out of
just rollerblade your way through life.
That's right, like Ken.
Straight up beach volleyball.
This was post beach volleyball. At this point I kind of fallen out of the hobby a little bit. I wasn't even role playing for a couple of years. I wasn't even role playing, and then when I came back, I got super into it. So, this is now released as Epic 40,000.
Yeah. And I played a ton of it.
It's kind of, it's not two separate systems combined anymore. This is the first time it's kind of put together.
Yeah.
But it's only supported for like 6 months. It's not successful for Games Workshop.
That's funny because I was just playing this and I would, get miniatures. I played this for years and didn't even realize at the time that it wasn't supported until I was reading your notes on this today. I was like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't supported. Like
it for
6
years.
months. There were models that they had planned to do that never got made as a result of it. But designed by Jervis Johnson, Andy Chambers, who both maintain that it's the best rule set they had ever conceived. And I heard very good things about the rule set. I did not play it. You're shaking your head.
This was the end of Epic for me. Like, I did not like this rule set.
Interesting.
Part of it, and this will resonate, I think, with a lot of 40K players of a certain era, of the base has changed.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a note in here too.
This isn't just we needed a base ring. It was you went from a square to a rectangle. And then this is when they introduced the suppression markers.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot more blast markers and suppressions.
And it just
changed the orders.
It changed, the game fundamentally changed. Like,
so it's kind of like going from Warhammer Fantasy to Age of Sigmar.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's a,
it was, I would say that's a maybe not quite, but similar, that level of change. Yeah. And it was, you kind of needed a new army. You didn't, there were conversion rules for how to use the old with the new, but it really was written for these different style bases, and the old vehicles now had new versions. And it totally lost me. This is also when I was starting to play a lot of 40K. This is when like Anthony and I had really met and we're hitting it off. We were also playing.
It's just interesting fantasy how battle then. We all kind of weave in and out through different things at different times, right?
Yeah, but I remember this being so foreign that I was like, I'm just not interested. Read the rules, read like stereo instructions, and I was like, I'm out.
It's so interesting that the writers can feel like this is the best set we've ever made. It's not for everybody, right? Yeah. I think that's, fair of any game. I think that's fair of any game, right? Yeah. Oh my God, you guys are disagreeing. Hang on. Josh.
I played so much of this. How did you not love it?
Jody, you're wrong. No, you're wrong.
I didn't play first edition Space Marine, but I played everything after that. Actually, I did not play Armageddon.
Okay.
That was
which is next. Yeah. 2003 referred to it as Epic Armageddon. It's also referred to as Epic Armageddon. And it's so funny that every time we talk about these games, we always talk about them as epic, but it really wasn't until this point that it was kind of
Epic 40,000.
But I think they called them Epic Scale.
Yes.
Right. So unlike previous editions of this game, other games produced by Games Workshop, this was kind of like, there was like an open trial period where they were sourcing the rules and getting feedback and all that.
What was that called? That whole era had a name. It was like Fanatic. This is
really?
like
there was, yeah.
Oh yeah, you could be
and they were putting out annual magazines,
Yes.
and Mordheim got caught up in this a little bit.
Yep. And you had like
fifth edition Blood Bowl.
you
was
had like
big in this.
champions of it that would
Yeah.
like not in game, like people who were champions of the hobby were going out and trying to
Yeah, and there would be net forums where the actual
'cause
rules
they had
group
actual
would happen.
rogue traders like going
Yeah.
to shops
Yes.
and promoting new releases and things like that. Yeah.
So the core game rules needed to play Epic Armageddon were included in the set, as well as lists for Space Marines, Imperial Guard, and Orcs. And there was a second rulebook released for this 4th edition of it called Epic Swordwind, and this contained army lists for Bieltan Eldar, the Baron Siege Masters, whatever the heck those are, Imperial Guard Army, and Warlord Snagga's Feral Orc Horde. So there was a huge number of armies that were playable in quote unquote Epic, which orcs, feral orcs, speed freak orcs is different factions, but Eldar, Chaos Space Marines, Chaos Mortals, the Lost and the Damned, Tau. And then what happened, which we've seen happen with other systems, in particular Battlefleet Gothic, we've seen this with, is the community kept going with this.
Yeah.
Once Games Workshop kind of abandoned this, the community continued to work on it. And Mordheim was the other one we've seen this done with. And Adeptus Mechanicus, Necrons, Tyranids, Tau, Imperial Guard, Death Court, Krieg, all those things become added as like this net EA group, this group that's working on kind of adding additional things. I don't know how successful that particular thing is or was. Like, I don't know if you know, Josh, you'd be the only.
I don't know for
Tom may know.
I didn't play Armageddon at all because that was my post high school. I was in college doing all that college stuff then. Meeting girls, drinking, all those fun things. So I wasn't playing then. But Blood Bowl, I think, is the best comparison for the fans carrying that forward, and that was wildly successful.
Yeah, I mean, Brentonians are in one of the video games, and they were one of these teams.
Yeah.
The Khorne Demon team exists in the video games. There's never been an actual GW team, but there were net ones. And I will say, of this, for many years, still existed as an internet entity. It's referred to as Net Epic Gold. If you go,
is it?
Yeah. If you go look up Net Epic, it is completely fan done, and it is the continuation of this evolution of these rules. And much like Legions Imperialis, a design choice was made by that community to go backwards in terms of rule systems.
Okay.
They didn't go forwards. So, but
because Epic Armageddon is a lot more like Apocalypse in how it plays, right? It's much more simplified. You have the blast tokens, the way wounds are dealt with. I haven't played it personally, but from what I hear,
Yeah.
I wasn't.
And we did play Apocalypse.
The new Apocalypse
Apocalypse, which clearly got inspiration from that. So in fact, one of my theories is that Apocalypse clearly got abandoned. Like, it came out and then that's it. You don't really hear
that was it.
How you
it's
do it.
not supported anymore. Which is unfortunate because I think it was really fun, but I think financially for Games Workshop, that's not where the play is at. That's not where people are really playing the game. Occasionally it's fun to do.
Yeah.
But it's not like every game you're going to bust out Apocalypse.
That's not where new players are going for.
Yeah,
and they want that new player money.
Yeah, and so I'm sure, and most people are not like us. They don't have collections of this size and scope that you could be like, I'm going to field an Apocalypse army. Now, I know people listening to this right now are like, well, I have an army like that. You welcome to the club.
Yeah.
Like, you are the shameful, unique person that we are that has spent too much on this damn hobby. But the reality is, like, it just isn't where the money is. And what's funny, and I know we're diverging slightly here, but what's funny is I remember when Apocalypse first came out, fourth edition, like, they really did a huge push for that. And they were selling like loads of models because you'd buy like, this kit has 3 rhinos and this kit has 3 vindicators, and and you'd get them at a discount,
Right.
Because you were buying them in bulk, and man, we were just going.
That's why there's a Bane blade and a Stampa.
That's why there's a Bane blade and a Stampa. But going back to my original point was, Apocalypse definitely took inspiration from this.
Yeah.
The way you would place wound markers on units. Wounds were not tallied till the end of the round, so at least your guys got a chance to shoot before they got wiped out. And I have to say, like, it made me appreciate this smaller game, Epic.
Yeah.
Having played that at a larger scale and gone, oh, I see. Wow, that's a really clever way of handling that.
And I think we'll bring this back with Legions Imperialis too. But there was actually a lot of really smart game design and modern game design 30 years ago, which is an interesting thing to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the question would be, much like Battlefleet Gothic, when we did a show on Battlefleet Gothic many years ago, Justin and Chris and other guys would be like, oh, that game's the best. Battlefleet Gothic is the best. If you listen to, it's the greatest game Games Workshop has ever come out with. If you play Battlefleet Gothic now, bless you. It is.
It's Jody's favorite game.
It's the only GW game I will not play.
Oh, I didn't know this.
If you walk up and you're like, I have all the stuff, I have all the rules.
You're like, no.
Let's play. I'll say no, thank you.
Why is that?
It's terrible rules.
Yeah,
They're bad. They're I can say, pointing to objective things, this is an incredibly dated style of rules writing.
Yes,
it is.
That is, frankly, we know better ways to do this.
Yes,
Roll dice
and this
to
is
roll
what I
dice
said.
to roll dice to see if something happens. Maybe
When we played
many fail
that
states.
game, it was. I was like, this is clunky, and then I played a game like Firestorm Armada, and I was like, oh
yeah, they're definitely better fleet games.
like this is super.
I still enjoy Battlefleet Gothic. It's still fun, but there are definitely better fleet games out there.
I would love to see Battlefleet Gothic get like a modernization of rules and thinking like Titanicus.
They use the terminal system like Titanicus that gets rid of all your critical hit charts, and you just have structure points right there with locations and shields, and you're done. Like,
so my favorite
game's already better.
Point to make about Battlefleet Gothic, and I will say this in the context of let's talking about Legions Imperialis.
Yes.
You walk up and you see a game, a Battlefleet Gothic set up, and you watch the people at the table, leave, come back at the mid game.
Yes.
Look at what's the people at the table, look at what's on the table, leave, come back at the end of the game. There will be a minimal difference, and the interaction that the people are having will look exactly the same.
I agree with you.
There will be no change.
Damn it. I don't want to agree with you.
The board state,
I mean, you're wrong.
Is like, yes, the board state has changed.
Yes.
But unless you are actively the one playing, it is changed minimally. And visually, it's not telling you anything.
No.
Like the story just isn't there.
You need more torpedoes.
I will tell you this, and this has been, you asked in the notes about what appeals to us about original Epic, and I'd say now as well, that is not the case. Like, it is an incredibly dynamic game. 40K is a very dynamic game. They've gone to great lengths rules-wise to make it a more, like, what's going on the table is... I will say for Battlefleet Gothic, the Eldar notwithstanding, but that's also incredibly problematic within the game.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I didn't mean to go on a Battlefleet Gothic route, but you actually hit my point earlier, which is, why are you not playing Legions of Paris aside? Why were you not playing Epic anymore? Did the rules become dated, or did it just die out because things die out and or you couldn't find people to play with, or what was it that stopped you from playing this game?
For me, it was, I got way more deeply into second edition 40K, and I think it was 5th edition Warhammer Fantasy Battles at the time, and there was just way more people to play with.
Yeah.
It was a much bigger scene, more variety. And at that time, the game went in a little bit more... Like second edition 40K was very different from what 40K looks like now. Just more depth, more crunch to it, but still not a lot of models. Really, it was kind of played at a skirmish scale. You had 15 models in a standard game or whatever of second edition. And also, I was a broke kid, so price point was like I could get a lot of games in. I didn't need a lot of models, and I could just go to town on and progress my hobby further. Also, from a printing standpoint, like just way more detail and things to deal with at that scale versus the old Epic, we should say was 6mm scale, so teeny tiny. rough 6
Even
millimeter
smaller.
scale. Even smaller.
Substantially.
This is the first time I painted something this small.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like, good God. And my eyes are older now. And so it's like,
That's funny. I look at these Marines and I'm like, they're huge.
And they're
so big.
So funny.
So I used to, when I was painting Epic, this is way back when, but I would just have them all lined up, but my mom would call them bugs. Like, you're painting your bugs, and I wasn't playing Tyranids or anything. It's just like
not bugs, Mom.
Space Marines at that scale, like kind of look like a ladybug or something, because it's just a couple dots of color and that's it. So yeah.
My mom used to be like, you're going to ruin your eyes. Oh my God.
I'll stare at the TV.
Speaking of old eyes, I just got my driver's license renewed. And I had to go take like the vision test. It was the first time I've ever taken my glasses off and been able to read the thing, because I got the LASIK surgery many years ago.
Nice.
Now I just wear these primarily for reading, but it has impacted my painting, and my eyes get tired painting way faster than they used to. It's like,
Yeah, I used to joke with my buddies, God, I hope I get nearsighted. I am.
It's the worst.
See it. It's crystal clear right here.
Yeah.
You're a little blurry.
I am nearsighted. Like, I was so nearsighted, it was debilitating. And LASIK.
Yeah. Thankfully for
They're
now,
like,
I'm
do you
good.
want us to fix one nearsighted one? No. Just get rid of the nearsighted. I will wear reading glasses. Anyway, so yeah, the reason I brought up the Battlefleet Gothic was about the dated rules, because you nailed it. Because I felt the same way. Like, everybody spoke, and I'm like, you guys are looking at this rose-colored glasses or something, because this game does not play smoothly. I would love to see them updated.
Yeah.
Like, but I don't know of any fleet games I've ever, like, you hit on some interesting points too about, you come back to the table and you're like, okay, it's still kind of looks the same. Firestorm Armada, there was more movement and stuff, but likewise, like, I don't think you see a lot, because capital ships take a lot of damage, so they're still there on the table, blah, blah, blah,
Brian got really into Drop Zone Commander for a hot minute but again, it created that dynamic board.
I played one game of it. It was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Brian and I played Drop Fleet Commander, which is one of the best fleet-based games I've also played. And then also,
I'm also
sad all
I'm
these
also
dead
terrible
games.
at fleet games, by the way.
but that was interesting because it's not like just deep space fleet game. It is low orbit fleet game. So you're actually interacting with a planet. You're dropping troops off on sites, and then there's weapon systems and and it was a really neat rule set and super fun. But.
Funny enough, you asked like why did you break from it?
For you, Epic Armageddon, you already said.
Yeah, it was Epic Armageddon. And it's funny with the old world returning right now, it's very similar of like, I don't know that I want to go back. Like, I have my old fantasy armies on square bases. I didn't light mine on fire. I kept it.
Smart.
I thought it was neat. And I'm like, yeah, I could just buy an adapter. I don't know. Like, it's weird how not excited I am to go back.
Travis is like super excited about it.
It's funny to me how, because Legions Imperialis is in many ways going back to the game I started with. It is very similar to Space Marine 2nd Edition.
Yeah.
Like, very. It doesn't feel like as big of an ask, and enough time's gone by that it feels like it is something entirely new. Yeah. It's not having to re-rack something I already have.
Understood.
Which is really unpleasant. Like, I mean, ultimately, if I had to say, why did you get rid of your orcs? It was the rebasing. I mean, because we're talking about hundreds
That's a lot of
and
rebasing.
hundreds of rebasing models. And then by the time I was done with that, I was like, I don't enjoy this anymore. Like, the joy has been pulled away from it because I'm just re-racking something I already have.
Right.
You're not progressing forward.
There's no payoff.
There's
there
a-
either, than that, you can play it.
There's a
in the
step
rules.
back.
And
to then
until
step
now,
forward.
that's what Epic would have always felt like. But now it feels like it's been long enough, it's been a big enough gap that it's going forward to
fresh
something
again.
new I enjoy. It's coming back. I mean, it's coming back, but without having to regress.
And all new miniatures that are way better than the original ones ever were. And yeah.
And it's not like I'm replacing things I already have that I'm like, oh, could somebody in our group, I think it was Tom, asked about like, oh, you can't really use the old models here.
Oh, can
like,
you not? Yeah. I don't know like, I remember Aaron had a huge collection of Space Marines that he bought at Game Castle Flea Market, and then I think he gave them to Tom. So I'm sure that's some of what Tom's.
And I mean, I don't want to tell anybody you can't play however you want to play, of course,
but it's not going to rack up.
It's not going to look right. There's some serious scale difference. It's going to
6mm to 8mm doesn't sound like a lot, but that's 25%. Like, that is a big scale difference.
If you're trying to play 40K with new modern stuff and your buddy still has RTB01 Rogue Trader Marines,
It just doesn't feel right.
It's going to look,
I get you.
It's going to be weird.
Yeah.
And it's going to create some issues as you're playing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially, I think Tom has the rectangular bases too,
does.
instead of the
He does.
squares, which is even more varied.
Now they're round.
Yeah.
So I like that idea. Like, it feels like you're progressing, not you're regressing or just retreading for the sake of, because the company said so.
Yeah. I mean, the base shift thing was a huge thing for people. Now it's not even talked about.
Right.
You know, which is interesting. Like that 28 to 32 mil base.
Well, as you've said a bunch, they look better.
They do.
They do.
I hate it, but they do.
Yeah.
I mean, like I look at the old ones, I'm like, I have a bunch of them for the Minotaurs. I'm never going to rebase those guys. Are you kidding me?
Got a resin printer, make some rings.
Yeah.
Or not.
Print new bases.
They're all old Marines. I don't want to do them anyway.
Yeah.
I'm sticking with Chaos. I love it.
There we go.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, that kind of solidified why you kind of stepped away from it. We all know why Josh got into this and dragged. I really wasn't going to do this. I was like, I'm not doing it.
No, you were going to.
I wasn't.
Yeah, you were.
But I had so much fun with Titanicus with you.
It was
that
inevitable.
I was like, it's gonna...
You didn't think you were. I knew you would.
Did you? Really? Yeah. I hate being that predictable.
It's a great game. You don't like games?
You're gonna
I
love
do.
big
This
and
is
predictable.
I wasn't super into Titanicus, and then I played with Josh. I'm like, God, man,
It's a
All right,
great
Josh,
game.
How
What
dare
else?
you call me a pusher earlier?
What else do I
How
got?
dare you?
I'm an 8mm pusher. You're the gateway drug.
Moving on.
These will fit up your nose. All right.
They're pretty
anyway,
snortable. I don't recommend it, but
Yeah, not for small children.
All right. Anyway, so let's do this. That's kind of the history of where this ultimately came from. I look, I don't think we would have Legions Imperialis if you didn't have these games.
No,
right?
agreed.
And what we'll talk about next, we're gonna take a short break and then we'll come back and we're gonna talk about Legions Imperialis, where it kind of sits in the lexicon of Warhammer games out there now, and then maybe a bit more about rules and what appeals to you, what doesn't, and models, obviously. So we'll be right back. All right, we're back. We're talking Legions Imperialis now.
Yeah.
We've moved on from the past. We're stepping into the
Back to the future.
historical future.
It really is. That's weird.
What Jeff and I used to call it future history.
Yeah.
So, Legions Imperialis has released in 2023 to sell out kits. I mean, there's a crazy amount of material that came out and sold out immediately.
Yep. Came back in stock, sold out immediately again.
Which don't get me started on the hardback Siege of Terra.
Oh,
Congratulations. I'll just
Cheyenne bailed me out.
Yep.
Like Cheyenne bailed me out because I was
Yep.
that queue system.
Yep.
Anyway,
Legions Imperialis.
Legions Imperialis, which also takes place in 30K.
it does.
Yeah, so it has come out. Now, unlike its grandfathered systems, is set in the Horus Heresy universe.
Correct.
30,000.
Yeah.
And
Well, the first one was too.
was it?
The Horus Heresy was designed for Epic.
Oh,
Adeptus
that's right.
Titanicus.
And that's where the blurb came out,
Yeah,
actually,
yeah.
about.
Is in Adeptus.
The Warlord Titans were the reason Adeptus Titanicus kicked off the Horus Heresy, because they only had enough models to do one
How interesting.
tooling of. So it was two separate colors of the Beetleback Warlord Titans.
Makes sense.
Let's make a Civil
Again,
War.
I think this is why this has been approached this direction,
Yeah.
right? Like, if we were to try to field all of the forces, the 20 something factions of 40K
Right.
into
Yeah.
a new tooled game, like it's cost prohibitive.
Yeah.
Like there's just no way. And the minute you do orcs versus space marines, people are like, whoa, what about Eldar? What about Necrons? What about
Chaos?
Tyranids?
What about
Chaos?
X? Anything? Yeah,
Yeah, I mean-
every faction.
It's yeah, I mean, I remember John French talking to me about Primarchs fighting, right? Or revealing, who was it? Guy Haley was talking about revealing where the Legion of the Damned originate from. And he's like, if you answer that question, 90% of the people are going to be upset with the answer.
Yep. Can't unring the bell.
Right? Because it not that he even knows what the answer is, but if we definitively come out and say, well, they're blood angels who are damned by blah, 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 then everybody else is going to be like, well, that's not how I see it, And so no matter what, if they had launched this in 40K as a Eldar versus thing or an Orc versus thing, the other factions are going to be upset.
Yep.
You have to do all of them or do none of them.
So to that end, I think they were smart about what they did decide to go with.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. You got Space Marines and your Solar Auxilia,
which is great.
And you got 2 flavors of Loyalist and Traitor.
Oh, man. Release Mechanicum.
Probably will.
Oh.
I mean, because that's the 2 other 30K factions would be Mechanicum.
Demons.
And demons. Yeah.
Mechanicum would be cool. Maybe I could get a guy on stilts.
It didn't exist in 30K.
Oh, right. My bad.
Stilts are 10,000 years of R&D.
It would be fascinating. It all depends on how popular it is and how sustainable it is. Right. I mean, clearly initially
the rate that it's selling out, I'm hoping that gives it legs.
The initial drop is sold out. I don't know what the run was. Nobody ever knows. But I mean, they had to have anticipated good sales, but it sold out incredibly fast.
Yeah.
I was lucky to piecemeal together what I got. And I actively chose not to do the starter box for
there's
for
reasons,
better or worse.
There's reasons to do that.
Yeah. But so it's released in 2023. It's more of it is coming out in 2024. It was delayed.
Yeah.
Because they need to go back and reprint some missions that had some problematic titles or whatnot, which I totally appreciate the move there. Whether that's overly sensitive or not, I don't know. I wouldn't have known, but some people would have known that there's some right-wing faction stuff, based on the title of a mission or something to that effect. But I'm glad they made the right decision for them. The starter box contents for Solar Auxilia Dread Ends. Am I saying that right?
No. Oh, so for the Space
Dread
Marines,
and 4 Dread.
You get 4 Dreadnoughts.
Oh, okay. That's your notes.
That's my notes, and I made a typo.
Yeah, okay.
Please
4 Dreadnoughts.
Yep.
And then what for Solar Auxilia?
You get 4 Ogryn and 4 Sentinels.
4 Ogryn. Right.
Yeah.
We just talked about that.
Yep. And
Again,
then
I don't have
you get
the set.
tanks
Okay.
with both factions. And then the 2 Warhounds that can go wherever.
Okay, interesting. Now the
Sort of.
some of the tanks are, as we talked about earlier, not yet available widely. The
Outside of the starter box.
Predator and
Sicarans.
Sicaran.
None of the tanks in the box are available yet.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's true.
so you can't get Layman Rust tanks.
And
You can't
Kratos
get
don't come with
Malcandors.
those stuff.
Yeah, Kratos you can get, Baneblades you can get, but those are not
With the starter.
They're not
with
in
the starter.
box yet.
So I put in here a note. The starter box is very interesting to me in terms of, because if you try and go, okay, other than just as a fan, look at this box. As a new gamer, if I am brand new coming to Legions Imperialis, is this a 2-player starter box? I don't think it is.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, for one, the 2 factions aren't evenly matched. They're not evenly matched in points, and they're not evenly matched in combat ability. Per the way the game works, you can't technically field the 2 Warhounds. So even if I went, okay, I'm not going to worry about rules. You're going to take the Space Marines and 1 Warhound. I'm going to take the Solar Auxilia and another Warhound, and we're going to play. You would not have an enjoyable experience.
Interesting.
The box is not formatted in a way that it presents itself in a welcome to Legions Imperialis. This is how you approach the game. Mm-hmm. It's not presented in a starter friendly way.
The inclusion of Titans, which is you can't legally field Titans at this scale. Like obviously later down the road, Titans are going to be great and fun and useful. But the inclusion of 2 Titans with 2 separate factions instead of something like terrain was an interesting choice for me.
Now I get it from an aesthetic point of view, because Legions Imperialis is a game about scaled warfare and bespoke units, and we have infantry, tanks,
infantry,
titans,
walkers, tanks,
knights,
titans.
Like you get all things 40, 30K, great and small is the game. So it's visually telling that story. From a gameplay standpoint, it's not as satisfying what's in the box. The best thing
really
you can do is you and a buddy each buy a starter box
and split,
and then trade halves. That will get you a very enjoyable place to start.
What I did,
And clearly, Games Workshop knows this, right? Some of the box has to be marketing. The inclusion of the Warhounds is like, look, and I also get these great Warhounds. They know people are splitting.
We should say that the Warhounds also came with a new weapon sprue.
Yeah.
Which is new plastic weapons that are Titanicus compatible.
Yeah.
And the only place you can get them at the moment until these Warhounds come out and their new repackaging is in that starter set. So a lot of Titanicus players already excited about Legions Imperialis because of the scale compatibility and Titans being compatible. This is the only way you could get those new weapon sprues also.
I hope they release those sprues separately.
I doubt it.
I doubt it too.
I think they're only going to come in the new Warhound box when they repackage that.
I think so.
I will say it is worth noting. We haven't said this, and if you don't know, you don't know. Titan, Adeptus Titanicus, Legions Imperialis, not the same game.
No, they are two separate games.
Like entirely separate.
Very, very different games, different different audiences, different rule sets, completely different, but compatible miniatures.
So here's the interesting
fun with
thing,
toys two ways.
Though I'll throw out to your point.
Same with Aeronautica Imperialis. Planes are also fully compatible. Very different game.
So here's what I'll throw out to your point, Jody, is what I'm hearing is this starter set. Is it called a starter set?
I don't think it is.
I don't think it is. It's also, I would argue, not for a new hobbyist.
And here's my yes and question.
Yeah.
Is this still living under the banner of what we think of as specialist games?
Yes, it is.
Right? And I think that's probably
that's a good point.
Given who I'm assuming most of the audience that's tuning in and hanging out with us is it's worth noting this is in the specialist game vibe of Necromunda that it's a curated experience that you are signing up 30K. You are signing up for a curated experience that you want to have. It's not this is a bespoke presented
less mainstream.
It's going to ask you to do some things.
I feel those specialist games, that's a really interesting point you just made. And I feel like you hit on it, which is 40K, Age of Sigmar, Warcry, Kill Team. Those are the entry points for the Games Workshop hobbies.
Yeah.
When you start to look further, you go, oh, look, they also do these other games. Now that I've gotten my feet wet, this sounds kind of fun. Necromunda is definitely, like, it's funny, we talked about this on our episode about Necromunda recently, people are always like, oh, well, it's cheaper to get into. You know?
Yeah, and this is definitely in that.
Model-wise, yes. All the books
you're going to buy,
the terrain, maybe not.
Yeah, so it all adds up. But that's interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought about that in a long time. Yes, you're right. This does live in the specialist games domain.
Right.
And there's a very clear line of delineation. I would argue those specialist games lines, which do not include Warcry, Kill Team, right? Those are all mainstream.
Right. Correct. Yeah.
Those specialist games are really for, I think, I don't want to sound gatekeepy, but like the advanced hobbyist, advanced gamer.
Right. There's going to be things you're going to have to fill in on your own. There's going to be conceptual things. You're going to have to curate your game with your opponent a little bit more.
It's unusual that somebody would get started. They're like, I'm just getting started in Games Workshop stuff. I'm starting with Necromunda. I think this is even further afield of that. I'm starting with Legions Imperialis,
which is interesting.
I couldn't even remember the name of it.
There's Legions Imperialis Facebook group, which is more like hobby centric, but there are definitely people that are brand new to miniature gaming jumping in with Legions Imperialis, which is an interesting choice for them because it's going to be a very different experience.
And it's weird because I would say rules wise, which we'll get to here in a bit, it is a better spot to jump in.
Yeah,
it is more rules friendly. not the way the book's laid out, but as the game actually works,
as how the game plays.
It's a very easy to grok game and get your fingers into and presents interesting discussions. But yeah, the box itself is weird.
Well, say on the caveat of that is Games Workshop has put out a formation that is specific to the starter set. So if you are combining your Space Marines and Solar Auxiliary and a Scout Titan, there is a legal formation that they release specifically for the box set.
But I can play that box set against yours.
Yes.
Not I get a box set and you and I play.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Now you can do what Josh and I did, and I think this is, again, going back to my earlier comment about start small, is I don't remember exactly what the Solar Auxilia player needs to pull 1 or 2 units out.
Yeah.
Leave out the Titans, and you can play, and it's an enjoyable game.
Yeah.
If you have terrain.
Yes.
You need to get your terrain squared away.
Because none's in the box.
Yeah.
It's an interesting choice.
But I get, so this is, I might be oversharing here, but I'm going to live with it. So having done the playtesting I've got to do with Blitz Bowl, we have to talk about every time we've done that, what's going to be in the box.
Right.
How many individual cards are in the deck?
Yeah.
How many team cards? We had an interesting conversation with James Hewitt about like the number of squares you move is like perfect and balanced. And we're like, how did you come up with that? He's like, it's the size board that would fit in the size box I was allowed to use.
Yes.
With the size
without a doubt,
Thinking about the degree of thought that goes into what's going to be in this box has a lot to do with how many sprues are in the box.
100%.
So if you said we need terrain in this game to really have the game experience, which you do, we're going to pull the Warhounds out. Nope. We're going to pull one of the sprues of tanks out.
Why not the Warhounds?
What's the game about? What's on the cover of the box?
That's true. You got a good point.
From a gameplay starter perspective, I think the Warhounds are the thing to pull out. From a marketing standpoint, as you were saying earlier,
but I think
it doesn't appeal to my Imerialis. Then I want to pull in those Titan.
You've got a very good point. I mean, it's all about the marketing.
It's just interesting. I don't think it's bad. It's just like
you have to. They have to consider all these things too. Like I said before, Leviathan is the most complex starter set they have made for Warhammer 40,000. They had to commit like something like 18 different sprues to that. Like
much tooling.
When I talk to people over there, they're like, we've never had to do that. Like normally there's like 4, and now you're talking like there's all these bespoke things in it and it's incredible. But you raise a really, really good point, Jody, which is like there's a lot of thought that goes into what, and we can sit here in armchair quarterback and why didn't they include this? And it's like, well, there's probably a reason.
There's a reason, and it might not be
the reason you want to hear.
Right. It's not, well, would this present the best possible experience for 2 players to grab this box? No, because there's a lot of other considerations.
But also the argument that it is a specialist game.
Yeah.
That and not to use that as an excuse, but it really is. This is in this different niche. That's why we have this arm.
Seems to be different design criteria for that than the other. And I'd say it might answer why, and this is my one of the entire box, Josh, you probably know where to go. My one like genuine critique is the tokens that you use constantly. Josh, you've mentioned it, I know.
They're junk.
They're terrible.
Yeah.
It may literally come down to what weight of card stock could we justify
that's quite possible
spending money on to put in the box. We hit our dollar threshold.
What does the box weigh? Or it's
the size of the box is how do I ship it?
It's fascinating when you think about every piece of that goes in. I mean, there is a standard box size for these things, just like board games.
There's space in the box, but it was some other consideration, weight, cost, etc.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And there's a dollar amount they can comfortably go. We can spend this much on this box.
It's got
to sell it at this price.
I'll bet you
point.
that's what it was.
And the card stock
the card stock is expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, thank God.
I mean, we board game enough that we see,
or coin
games
holders or something, because you need something because they're terrible.
But that's fascinating. That's actually some really interesting points you just brought up. I had not.
The other thing I'm going to say is because this was delayed a couple of months, we don't know exactly, but roughly 4 months, 4 to 6 months. We also were able to see a lot of the previews of what is coming because we already know what's coming in the next.
It was almost painful.
Yeah. because we had so much time. But that being said, this box is not sold as a complete game. Like, it is very much intended to be played with everything else that is being released, and we've already previewed. We already know what's coming. We know what's coming, what it's going to be there, and what it's going to do, and what it's going to add to it. So this box is not a self-contained.
Why did I
box.
get into this game?
Well, this brings us to that actually goes to the next point.
Yeah.
Of in the notes, you've got, what about the absorption of Aeronautica Imperialis and Adeptus Titanicus into the game? You know, like, and that is the game. Like, make no mistake, this game, and I think it's one of the most interesting parts of Legions Imperialis or its epic predecessors, was that it's a game that has these different bespoke units that you can have jets and titans and infantry. And it's a game, because it's set to do that from the beginning. It makes all those things play well together.
They had to have this planned out when they did Aeronautica Imperialis.
I don't think so.
You don't? I do.
So James Hewitt had said in our Facebook group that they had, when they designed Titanicus, they had left space and kind of design and intentionality in the potential of being able to bring Epic to the Titanicus rule set. This is obviously a departure from that, but because it is a very different game.
It's gone the other direction.
It's gone the other direction. They've actually brought Titanicus into Legions Imperialis instead. So there was design and intention and space there, but that is not the direction that
what I'm saying is
Specials games went.
Model wise.
Yeah.
There had to be some forethought at the beginning of, we're going to do this Aeronautica Imperialis thing. We should pick this scale.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Right?
Scale, absolutely.
We're going to do Titanicus.
Yeah.
This is the scale we're using.
Yes.
Hey, okay, Legions Imperialis, this is a scale it all matches. Like, we picked a scale and we stuck with that scale. I'm not saying they knew from the get-go, we're going to do Legion Imperialis, we're going to make these jets.
Whichever one came first probably said, this is the scale now.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And I want a bunch of that probably had to do with the tooling and what they could do. And
where detail is,
because those Titans still blow me away for the details of those. It's
Titans, planes, tanks.
crazy.
Everything at that scale looks great.
It's insane.
Yeah.
All right. So moving forward, I think we got a little.
No, we're actually
that
right
was
on track.
a really great point. Let's talk about the rule book a bit. I'm pretty sure, looking at the way it's laid out and whatnot, Paul Rudge's team over at Specialist Games that did all the Imperial armor stuff. Now they're really focused on this kind of stuff. You can tell by the way it's laid out.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
Pretty sure that's his team doing this stuff. It's
very on par with a
way thicker than I thought.
Imperial armor book. Yeah, it's a beefy book.
Yeah.
A lot of rules.
But lore.
There's definitely lore on there. It's
they kind of shortened the Horus Heresy explanation a bit to give you what's going on. I thought that was cool.
It's Horus Heresy, so it has painting that picture, and then you're going to go through the rule book itself, which has, like I should say, it's a high quality book. It's got the ribbon built into it for your bookmark in there.
It's standard sized, so it's not like the Imperial armor books used to be larger. They're not doing that anymore.
Yeah.
These are all the same A5 or whatever they call it.
I do kind of wish, now that you said that, I'm like, oh, it would have been so cool if it had like a matte finish instead of the super gloss finish, but that's just wish listing. And I was like, oh, but to really make that point,
Matte
it might have been
more.
nice. But it might cost more. But it's a beautiful book. Like anything I'm about to
Production
say.
quality, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
And it holds together, unlike my Leviathan book.
The spine, pretty good.
Yeah.
It's great. It is not user friendly.
You know, and this has been, say what you mean by that, Jody, because I have a feeling, and we haven't pre-discussed this, but I have a feeling it's the same issue I have with a couple other rule books.
So there's two issues. One is it is not laid out in a sequential way, which bugs me.
Okay.
You don't start playing the game at the beginning of the book.
Okay.
You go to the back of the book to start playing the game, and then you go back to the front. Like, lay out the book in the order that if somebody is new to the game, this is the order you experience the game. It's not laid out that way, which is just...
It's kind of...
Or a page at the beginning says, how do you use this book?
It's not necessarily
Why not?
Great way to learn the rules or a great gameplay reference.
Oh, that's interesting.
Which is interesting because it does the way it jumps around.
Because that's what I was going to say about 40K. 40K is laid out to like, here we're walking you through each step, but when you try to reference it, it's a nightmare.
Right. When you get to the gameplay turn part, just the rules of we're going to walk you through a turn, it does an okay job of that. GW has a strange avoidance of rules repetition. Like they don't like repeating themselves in their rule books, which means you get the morale test, how morale works. It's on a 2-page spread. One of them's talking about close combat. One's talking about the end phase. And then there's a final morale checks during the end phase. And at no point does it combine all the various effects that all can play out in the end phase. There's no like cross-referencing within itself as a document.
Right.
So it's just, as Josh said, it's not great to learn the game from what is ostensibly a pretty simple game.
Mm-hmm. And it's not great as a reference.
So there's there's weapons rules, and then there's unit special rules, and they're alphabetically listed. Why are those 2 sections? They're all special rules. It's not 50 pages of them.
Right.
They're just make an alphabetical listing of special rules. They're universal special rules.
There's that word.
Right? That aren't crossing 20 different armies. They're
Right.
2 armies.
Right.
Like just put them in alphabetical order. So when I need to reference it, I go, oh, it's the special rule set. Flip there. And I will say, like, I am quadruply critical of this because I'm going to bring in the other hobbies, but like the indie role-playing scene right now of like, there's a lot of small press role-playing games being made that are being made at an incredible level of production value in terms of thought about layout and design that this book shows none of.
Interesting.
Like that's just things about how have you formatted your sections? How is a header set in?
Right.
How do you call out important information? There's essential rules that are in call out boxes. And anybody who's played GW games for a long time goes, well, of course the little call out box in the corner it's a little box in the corner. If it's an important rule, it needs to be in the rules. And it's rampant.
And
like,
make sure you read the last sentence.
and read it still has to read the whole paragraph.
Definitely has that.
That's my favorite. Somebody new to GW is like, hey, when you're reading a rule, read all the way to the end. Yeah. Don't read a section and stop. Go all the way to the whole thing.
Except on Thursdays. Okay. So, all right.
It's fair criticism.
Yeah.
All that being said, the book does contain everything you need to play.
Yep.
Has all the rules for your army list. It has all the rules for your units and all the special rules that do pertain to the weapons they have, the actual entries, the special rules that each unit has all the weapon profiles, has the how to play, has all your missions, your secondary missions, your board layouts, everything like that is fully contained in the book.
Yep.
I'll say the one caveat to the rule book that we're talking about. This is one of the few games that I have the physical rule book, and I actually took the time, the 5 minutes it took me to put little tabs for each of the sections so I can easily quick reference it. But I ended up picking up the digital copy of this rule book anyways, because just being able to add a bookmark or do a search was paramount for me. And I know I'm going to play this game for a long time, and it's like the $35 or whatever it costs.
Digital books.
I really have a hard time reading on screen.
Yeah. But in that 3,500 point game we were referencing, I could just easily hit my bookmark or do a quick search, and it would find it where I needed to be way quicker than any of the 3 other people flipping through a physical copy of a book. So.
I will say, and Josh, I think you say this somewhere in our show notes but once you get it down,
you've got it.
Yep.
Titanicus is the same way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. And for Titanicus, for me, it was 1 or 2 turns and you're like, oh, got it.
Yeah.
And there's a couple little things. Oh, well, when they walk over the side, let's look up that, but for the most part, it's just like every round went without looking up a rule. When I went and played up in the Gothamos Gaming Group guys.
Yeah.
Like I think I looked at the rule book one time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And this will probably get to that point pretty quickly for folks. And I will say the deck of cards that are sold out immediately are tremendously helpful. And that's a Space Marine 2nd edition. Actually, that's a Space Marine 1st edition. Yeah. You had unit cards in part because the way the cards tell you how to build your army. Yeah, there's literally take this card, here's your detached formation rules. Now here's the cards you can stick on it.
The only complaint I have about the cards, because they are a very useful reference, but it is a valid complaint, I think, is that it doesn't tell you how many of what weapons you have. And certain vehicles
have multiples. Yeah.
So it has a reference and a profile of everything, but sponson weapons, for example, are one weapon system. Even though it's 2 separate guns, it is one weapon system. Where if you have hull-mounted guns on a Kratos, for example, they have 2 of those. Those are 2 separate systems. And the card does not call that out. So
the rule book will say 2-hole mounted and blah, blah, blah sponsors.
But the card doesn't.
But for formatting, that's what they cut off the card. And
Yeah. It's like, that's important.
All right, so let's just, in the interest of time,
Yep.
let's just quickly go through like it like all Games Workshop games, it's going to follow like a format, right? You have one phase leads to, and all these things occur in it. Then another phase, all these things occur in it. Just walk me quickly through each of the phases.
Yep. So quickly is first thing you're going to do is the order phase. So every unit secretly gets an order assigned to it. Then you flip over said orders, and then you find out the initiative, which is the initiative phase. So while you're setting orders, it's interesting to note that you don't know if you're going first or second if you have that activation. Again, it's alternating activations. So not a huge deal in order of activations, but also can lead to some really interesting moments of the kind of play, counterplay.
Do you have to give an order to every unit?
Every unit will get an order. Yes. Units inside of transports get separate orders than the transports themselves. It can be the same order, but you're going to assign them individually. So there's lots of flexibility in there. After orders and initiative, then everybody moves, and then it goes into combat, and combat includes first fire orders, which it means you haven't moved. You are just shooting this turn. Engagements, which is all your close combat fading, and then advancing fire, which is everybody else who wasn't on first fire or in combat now gets to do the normal shooting.
One really smart mechanic of the game is as you're resolving in the combat phase, usually in the combat phase, as you're resolving units to go, how do we keep track of who's done what? You just pluck the orders off. And at the end of the turn,
you should have no orders.
Nobody should have an order still sitting on them.
Yep.
And there is a rule. If you forget to give somebody an order, they just have an advance order.
That is your
that's your default.
Your default order is advance if you've forgotten something. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when we say it's alternating activation in movement, it's you move what's called a detachment, which is a group of Space Marine infantry that's alike, or a group of, and then I move one, and we go back and forth in that way. But then that point Josh brought up at the top of the show of like, oh, and during that, my rhinos are going to charge this unit that you had. And the conversation becomes, well, if they're on first fire, they're a little bit better at overwatching, or were they charging and now they're not going to be able to charge because they got charged first. And that back and forth is incredibly satisfying.
Yeah. I would say that overall, I guess I'll save it for the end. Never mind. I think now's a good point to talk about just army construction and how it plays. So the first thing you're going to do is you choose your faction, and then you choose loyalist or traitor. So right now you have either Astartes or Solar Auxiliary, and then you have all the different...
And both of those can be loyalist or traitor.
Yes, you can go either way. Then you have all the legions inside of that for the Astartes side. So all the 18 available legions are there.
And somewhat unique, each one.
Yeah, each one has a special rule that sets them apart.
Not unlike Horus Heresy. Where,
yeah. And it's pretty minor, but some of them are really good and some of them are very flavorful. And there's kind of an interesting spectrum of that mix in between. Some of them are flavorful and powerful, and some of them are just kind of more on the flavorful side.
Okay.
So there is maybe a little bit of disparity in the rules, but again, specialist game, and it's going to be fun. And
it'll be interesting to see if they get to a point where they're releasing units specific to factions.
I think
Horus Heresy does, but we'll see. Right.
The next book has previewed a Blood Angel specific formation.
There you go.
So there are at least maybe formations, not necessarily units, but we'll see.
That would be that'd be the cheaper way to go.
Yeah. Okay. So once you have your faction decided, now you're going to go into formations. So formations are groups of detachments that have required components to them, and then they have optional. And these are basically slots you're filling. It's kind of a force org chart. Yeah. Each formation is its own force org chart. So you're going to have 1 to 4 roughly required detachments that have to go into that formation. Mm-hmm. And then you're going to have multiple formations. You need to have at least one formation per 1,500 points that you're playing. So in a 3,000 point game, you have to bring at least 2 formations. For example.
So a formation could be something like a line of battle tanks.
Yeah.
And your compulsories are all going to be battle tanks.
Right.
It's or it could be
you get like the demi companies and
the demi company. There's like
Marines.
Las Rifle sub cohort.
You got your tertios. I don't remember what they're called for the Solar Hawks, but demi companies it's all your Marines. This is your standard. So you got your HQ Marine, all of your tactical Marines. Then you can bring in specialists like Assault Marines, Terminators, Plasmas, Missile Launcher guys, all your sport. So you're going to build your army based upon formations, and then formations are made up of detachments. Detachments are effectively a unit.
Got it.
Which each base is considered a model. So even though you have 5 guys on a base, for example, it's a model.
And then
why do they sell me 120 models in?
which is actually 6 detachments.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. All right. So that's construction, effectively, like the tier of construction.
Yeah.
All right.
And I'll say just real quick on construction is that your primary faction is going to be 70% or more of your total points. And then you can bring up to 30 points, or 30%, I should say, maximum of kind of allies, is what you consider. So these are knights, titans, solar auxiliary, different kinds of space marines.
How do you expect those rules to change when larger titans get brought in?
I don't expect them to change. They're all available.
In order to bring in a Reaver Titan, you have to play a game.
Yep.
A much larger game.
Yes.
So you can legally field a Reaver in a 1,500 point game.
Oh, well, that's okay.
And
in order to bring in a Warlord Titan.
Yeah.
But that's interesting.
Then I should say the rules for all the Titans and Knights already exist. It's in the rule book.
Yeah.
So those are all included.
That's a good point.
I would say that 1,500 points seems to be the minimum. This is where the game operates
minimal
at.
viable.
Yeah.
point.
And not like you're playing a watered down version, but like if you're playing a 1,500 point game, things should be working properly.
I think you get the full game experience at 15.
That's a fair point.
Yeah. And you can field, like Josh said, up to a Reaver in that points game. I will say
you're probably really heavy on one unit if that's the case.
Exactly.
There is a lot of interesting balance in how the game works and how you build your army,
Much
and
like
what you build it with.
Lord of War in a
Especially so a Reaver Titan is a huge investment in points. So while you have one really powerful unit, you've got a lot of eggs in a single basket. So you're losing activations.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, this is actually something that you should talk. If people have not played alternating activation games, when one opponent outnumbers another opponent by a significant amount, that is a huge.
There's definitely advantages there.
That's a huge loss of advantage. Yeah, if you're outnumbered, all of a sudden you're watching your opponent take a bunch of moves and you're doing nothing.
And I would say Legions Imperialis and Epic had the same rule system. The way the morale system works in the game is a wonderful counterpoint to that.
Yeah.
Like it's how they counterpoint undeniably getting out activated. Your opponent has more units than you do is a problem. You always have the choice of, so if I take a detachment of 4 Marine stands, I can just buy more stands to throw in there, more groups of guys.
Yep.
So I go up to like 8, 9, 10 squads of just Marines instead of 4. Mm-hmm. Well, the break point for that unit when they have to start taking morale tests is when they get below 50%.
Right.
So if I have a bigger unit, it's a lot harder to get them just to the point.
Break.
Also, when they charge, they're more likely to survive through the overwatch. There's a lot of benefits to having a big unit.
Yeah.
So
but you lose out on activation.
But you lose out on activations.
So I think it's a really nice balance of how these two things are working.
Yeah. And it's a huge concern because
at a certain point, as you're going through learning and playing, you're going to reach an equilibrium where you're like, this works for me. Like this balance of this size units with this at this level.
And there's room in that balance for play style and like, how do you want this to play? What do you want this force to do?
And I think a huge part of this, as starting at that discussion of like, this is a specialist style game, there's also an amount of how are you and your play group approaching games of this? Because if somebody shows up and they have nothing but flyers, or you show up and you have a super tank heavy detachment versus, you could very easily end up in games that just aren't very enjoyable.
Sure.
Is it thematic? Sure.
Maybe. Yeah.
But I think there's actually enough balance built into those things that like tanks, yes, can kill infantry very well, but infantry can swarm tanks and absolutely destroy them in melee. Flyers are really good and they're a glass cannon. Flyers are very offensive.
Until they take a hit.
One hit and they're down. They're hard to hit, but flyers also can't grab objectives. So if you're putting a lot of points into flyers for that offensive ability, you're not grabbing objectives with those points. So I think there's a really interesting and I have this in the notes here, every unit entry in every detachment has a role that it wants to fill.
Interesting.
And I think it's very balanced in how it does that.
So you raised an interesting point, which was about grabbing objectives. So one of the things we discovered with Aeronautica Imperialis, it was my first foray into it. I was like, this is not very exciting. As soon as you introduced missions to it, I was like, oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Oh, this is way different than I thought it was. It's not just dogfight and everybody piles into the middle. This game, we saw with Adeptus Titanicus as well, the missions are super important.
Yeah, absolutely.
I imagine they're super important here too.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the rulebook comes with 12 missions out of the box.
That's quite a few.
Which is great. And there's deployment zones are tied to the mission specifically. So you get lots of variety in how you're going to deploy and how the game's going to happen. Having read through all of them, there's a lot of interesting diversity in how the missions work too. Some of them you're moving objectives, some of them they're all progressive scoring, I should say. So you are always in the game. You're always trying to score. It's not the fifth edition 40K. All the scoring happens on the end of the turn,
right?
Of the final turn. So you have all this crazy like maneuvering and grabbing and things like that. You're progressively scoring throughout the course of the game. Infantry are the best at scoring objectives. Then you go to walkers and cavalry, tanks, etc. And then the smaller you are, the better you are at grabbing an objective. So Titans, for example, can't grab objectives. Planes get pulled out before objectives are grabbed. So planes aren't contributing anything like that. So you need to build a force that is varied to deal with all. You want to offer problems and solutions to what your opponent has at the same time.
Yeah. The game does a great job of demanding to a degree. And I think maybe a better way of saying what I was saying before is you are kind of forced to take a combined arms approach.
Yes.
Right.
Fielding exclusively infantry, for example, you'd be great at claiming objectives. If the other person has a significant number of tanks and a little bit of an infantry screen, the tanks are going to blow your infantry away before they can get to swarm. Yes, they could swarm them. They're not going to get there. They're going to get blown up.
What about air power? I don't have much in the way of air power. Should I start investing?
It's it's hyper specialized. Like it is designed to do something very specific. I would say of all of the parts, air power's
the least
like
necessary.
Yeah.
Okay. That was kind of the gist I got, but eventually I want to. I just
you'll probably want a few, but really like 3 to 5 planes is probably all you're ever going to want. Really, you can definitely go more, but I think you're losing out too much on the defensive and objective scoring side if you invest any more heavily than that.
And there's it's in a weird way, planes are a great example of some of what I'm having a hard time fully capturing is even within air power, there are different planes with different roles. There are planes that are specifically intended to shoot down other planes, and they're very good at it.
Yeah.
And then there's a Thunderhawk, which is going to swoop in and drop off a bunch of dudes and hopefully be survivable enough to do that. And even within that little set of like aerial units, well, what kind of aerial unit are you bringing in? Why? And it goes back to that again, that idea of thinking about like an overall battlefield approach, an overall, what is my battle plan? How am I going to play out these units together? What's responsible for taking objectives? I think it's worth not going through the nitty gritty of it, but there's actually a hierarchy of how do you claim objectives, and you total up the models within 3 inches, and each one of those has a value based on what it is.
Sure.
So an infantry stand is a 5, whereas a tank is a 2.
Right.
This is
it's very
objective
similar.
control.
Exactly.
Comparison to 40K.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
And then you have to double to actually have control. So that scaling,
Meaning, if you have 10 points, I have to have 20 there.
yes.
So
to own it.
4 stands of infantry is 20,
Right.
versus 5 tanks
Which is 10.
is 10. So even though the tanks are outnumbering the number of models,
So everything has its role, and you use it
and
for
that's
that role.
Absolutely.
to the point Josh is saying is
everything has a job, and your job is to make sure you can prevent your opponent from letting their stuff do their job.
Right.
Yeah.
Shoot the chargey things and charge the shooty things. Right.
like, to a degree.
Yeah. Okay.
It's just,
But and then you
little
have more
complex,
layers. Go ahead.
well, because the slices of cake are more similar.
Yeah.
Because, and it's actually a thing I really like about Legions Imperialis is even if I'm playing Solar Auxilia and you guys are playing two different flavors of Marines, it's pretty predictable about what's what. And it's not, well, your Marines operate this way and his Marines operate. It's all pretty known. We're all playing open hand.
Eldar in Battlefleet Gothic.
Yeah, we're all playing with our the hand is known.
Right.
So it's so what did you do while you were playing that made the difference? What decisions did you make? You didn't win the battle when you built your army list.
There are way I haven't seen any yet, any gotcha moments of like how you built your list or what you did. It really becomes a more tactical game on how you executed your things and how efficient were using your detachments at what you wanted
I'm
to do.
going to be terrible at it.
Very few moving parts.
Okay.
But yeah, and that is a good thing to say there is that overall the rule set is actually quite simple. It is a simple game system, but there is also lots of nuance inside of that on how things work. This is definitely a easy to learn, difficult to master type of game. And a lot of that's that tactical nuance and figure out what things are best at doing as they're on their battlefield role.
Yeah. Yeah. So the next thing important, and I see that you have bolded here, is terrain.
Yes.
Terrain is very important.
Very important. A variety of terrain is important. Yeah. So the big thing for terrain is structures. As Jody alluded to earlier, structures can be destroyed. So that's a cool thing you can do, similar to the optional rules in Titanicus. Buildings can actually be blown up. Buildings are a bunker for infantry. Infantry want to be in buildings. They are more defensive. They get a cover save. They're harder to hit because they're taking cover inside of the building. Right. Their footprint becomes, instead of their base, they take over the entire building. Is their footprint. So things with aura
so if it's near an
abilities,
objective, that counts towards the objective.
You are counting every base in that building towards your objective. So very strong, both offensively and defensively for infantry being in buildings. Infantry are the only thing that are allowed to occupy buildings. And they're hard to shake once they kind of are dug in there. They're dug in. So having some options of things that can either ignore cover or destroy buildings is an important thing to bring in a list as well.
Right.
Also, another instance where having a larger detachment is because a building can hold most buildings can hold a detachment. Is that 4 bases of infantry, or is it 10 or 20 bases of infantry?
Oh, that's a very interesting point. So the larger unit, if you stuck 8 guys in a building right next to an objective, you have eight units.
Right. And now if I only
models in that building,
4 guys in that building and you shoot at it and you can kill a couple bases, they might take off and run away and flee out of the building.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that number thing starts being really important. Also, when you charge the building, because you can just assault the building, and if you win assaulting a formation that's in a building, if it's infantry, they can drive them out and take the building over,
take it over,
which is really
awesome.
thematic.
I love that. I love that. That was one of the things in Drop Fleet Commander I liked too, was like when you drop guys off to go in a building, you're searching for the objective, like they'd have to search and the objective would get progressively easier to find as they were spending more time in there. Cool. I just always thought that was like a really cool, I kind of dig the buildings as a function of the game. Yeah. You know, it's not just getting in the way. It's like, oh no, these are important.
And measuring ranges, you measure off any part of the building.
Sure.
Yeah.
And the guys in the building, every single one of them counts as being in base contact for a close assault.
Sure.
Whereas the assaulting force, the guys who are in base contact with the building
are the only ones.
That's the only ones fighting.
Right.
There's no, it is worth noting in close combat, there's no rings of the guys. Are you in base to base or not?
Yes. You either made it or you didn't. Yeah. It's all or nothing for that.
Yeah.
Buildings also block line of sight. It's a true line of sight game. So if you have big enough buildings or things like that,
especially it's such a small,
this is tiny.
I can see his arm.
I haven't needed to bust out a laser pointer yet, but it's probably not a bad thing to have for the game, just because it's hard to get your face that low to the game because the scale is so small.
As Justin says, hey, live it.
But as we're talking, buildings are they're a hard nut to crack. They are really, buildings make armor saves on 2d6. So it's a 5-up save for your kind of standard Civitas
2d6
build,
total?
but 2d6 added together. So
for the building itself, not the guys in it.
Yeah. So buildings themselves are actually very hard to take out. So it is important if you want to take buildings out and get to that kind of the juicy meat inside that you have something that can get through that armored shell.
If you're in the building and it falls down, that's bad.
It's bad.
That's bad for the guys inside.
Like instant bad.
No, not instant
No,
bad.
you're making saves. You're losing. You're losing.
You're
guys.
losing some guys.
And you're also not in a building anymore.
As you should. If a building collapses on you.
So the next one that's really neat is area terrain.
Yes.
It's been such a joy. I have stands of trees that are just like model railroad trees glued down to a piece of particle board that I literally made when I was playing Space Marine back in the days, and I still have them.
I think Josh had mentioned that you had some of this stuff and you guys were using it.
And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm getting these back out for this game again. The cool thing with a grove of trees, because we're not talking about a tree, it's a grove of trees or park, is infantry and walkers can move through it freely.
Yeah.
You can't trace line of sight through it. And if you're 1 inch within it, you can't see in or out of it.
Yeah.
So you can go in there and just, in fact, with the small games we played, I had a little group of what are they called? Veltari, the axe guys for the Solar Auxiliary. They just hung out in the woods the whole game, claiming an objective.
Claiming that objective and being
Can't shoot
safe.
me.
Can't
And
be shot.
do you want
You have to come in here to get me.
And it's a bunch of dudes with power axes. Do you really want to charge?
Come get
The
some.
answer is that's
That's why
be
they're in
rough.
the trees. They're chopping the trees.
Yeah, they're and they're
Yeah,
just
exactly.
just
They're just
straight
sharpening
up
the
Ultima
woodsman
Online.
axes.
Ask Josh how his hands are feeling about splitting all that wood he did the other day.
That was
Blood
impressive.
blisters.
So that's another line of sight blocker, the area terrain, and then you can say, oh, it's dangerous, it's difficult, and then
Right.
you can stack descriptors.
Right.
Ruins
You can
are
add
very
ruins,
similar.
lava, things like that. Ruins. The other thing is saying if you're not deep into the woods or if you're not deep into the ruins, then it's just a penalty to be hit. So you get some defensive bonuses without being the impossible to, I won't say impossible, but hard to crack nut of what a structure actually is.
Got it.
Yeah.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, it brings a ton to the game. The building piece, I mean, there's a reason when you look back at Space Marine first and second edition, first edition Adeptus Titanicus, they came with buildings. And it is a little bit of a shame that
They did. Now, to be fair, they did release a box set of terrain.
Yep.
Right as they released this, some new stuff too. Some new ruins. Like some of it was retreaded.
All the existing Titanicus stuff is still valid and compatible.
Yeah,
and
It's not like we don't have enough of that.
Yeah,
And it works
three
great.
kits of that, and then they added the ruins specifically, which also comes with a bunch of cool things like tank traps and shield
that.
walls and things like that. So I have picked up a box. I just haven't built it yet because I wanted to get the army ready to play with all the stuff that I've got already. But yeah, terrain is definitely an important part of this game.
All right. Let's do this. Let's take a break. Come back. Close out. Give some final thoughts on this, then we'll close out the show. All right, let's give some final thoughts here, and then we'll close out the show. We didn't discuss the models. There's a plethora of models that have been released already. Some are hard to find right now as they work through production pace and whatnot. And then there's even more coming. Like I said earlier in the show, I don't have any Predators. I don't have any Sikaran battle tanks. We'd like to get those. I know Land Raiders are coming out. My one frustration with that, I hate the old Land Raider. I hate the
Proteus.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of it, but I'll live with it.
It'll be interesting because if it doesn't have the assault ramp, which they don't because of that style, I mean, they're a good armored transport, but you're not like charging out of them.
I think you're going to be able to look kind of at the Horus
Spartans are
Heresy
for.
range and then just go, well, what are they going to come out with?
Yep.
Oh, probably this, probably that. It's going to be, I think, fairly. I wonder when they design these, if they have all these in digital files.
Yeah.
Like, so I wonder if they just literally go shrink it down, clean it up a little bit. I don't know. I'd be curious to know if it's designed wholly from scratch or if it's literally just taking.
Well, knowing what we know from Titanicus, the Titans were shrunk down from the CAD files, but then they have to do something. They have to modify a little bit because not all detail is going to translate when it's shrunk down that small.
Exactly.
So
What I was
they'll
talking about the
simplify a
Corvette,
little
right?
bit, but right. Predominantly it is a scale shrink, and then
is that?
you're going to remove some of that detail that would just be lost at that scale.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
That's just.
It's awesome.
But I don't know what details lost on those rhinos, man. Those
Not a
things,
lot.
Not much.
Not a lot.
Yeah, the tanks are so fun to
super
paint.
good.
Yeah.
And they are fun to paint.
Yeah.
And not hard to paint. Even the infantry is not hard to paint. It's just like, oh god,
There's just lots of them.
There's just lots of them because you
Lots
are
of them.
It's the size of the theater that you're fighting in, right?
Well, this box contains over 125 models.
I just realized my my bump from a fully painted 2,000 point list to 3,000 point list is like, oh, that's about 40 more tactical Marines. So
congratulations.
That'll keep me busy for a while. The 9 tanks will be a breeze, but
yeah. All right. So I put here under my final thoughts. Let's do yours first. What are your kind of final thoughts about the game?
Yeah.
About where it's headed? I'm
absolutely loving it so far. I'm excited for what's to come. I think there's going to be a lot more variety in play styles that comes when you have drop pods and speeder bikes and land speeders and things like that. You're going to see more diversity in lists and representing I think Legions maybe a little bit more thematically.
Like
White
Scars would have,
a ton more bikes and speeder bikes and speeders, and Blood Angels are going to get a bunch of drop pods and maybe more assault troops.
We
and
haven't
things
seen
like
drop pods yet.
We know they're
cool.
coming. Yeah,
those are going to be cool.
Yeah, yeah, they're going to be cool models.
They are. They're really cool. Look at the tiny drop pod.
Everything so far has been an absolute blast to play. It's been really fun to paint. It's been fun to hobby. It's been cool coming back to kind of that 8mm mass battle effect and how it really does feel like a battle.
As Jody was saying,
it's a war zone.
Your discussion afterwards is about,
40K is that kind of zoomed into a particular skirmish in that battle zone. This is the whole battle zone. And I really do feel like the overarching, like I'm the battlefield commander on the command barge up in space, directing orders and telling things where they need to go. And it really captures that feel well.
You were super excited about this game coming out for a long time. I was not. Has it met your expectations so far?
Yeah.
And it's matching your excitement level.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank God, because that's why I got into it.
I'm super excited. And honestly, right now, I just can't wait to play more of it.
All right.
Yeah.
Jody?
Yeah, that last bit, for sure. I am like...
Were you going to get into this from the get-go like Josh was?
No.
Or did Josh suck you in like he did me? No, you got sucked in on your own.
Yeah. So I was curious. I've been hurt before.
Yeah.
So I needed to tread lightly. When I saw that it was not Epic Armageddon, it was not Epic 40,000. It was going back to the Space Marine rules with alternating activations, which, considering those rules came out, in the 80s, late 80s.
Forward thinking.
Yeah. So far, I mean, there are games now that are chasing what this rule system does.
Yeah.
And they did go in and they've cleaned it up. Like, there are definitely some modern understanding of game design that's present. So when I saw that, then I was like, yep, I'm in.
Okay.
Dang it. Because I knew what that rule system offers and how different of an experience it is. It's one of the things that's always kind of kept me away from 30K is, I mean, now substantially, but when its initial launch, I was like, why am I just playing 40K with slightly different wrapping? It's still just 40K. Mm-hmm. And admittedly, it's moved away from that, especially now. Now it's a different animal. But it's still that same scale and zone. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Whereas this is a very different experience. It doesn't feel like you're playing 40K. I've heard a lot of people say of Adeptus Titanicus that like it doesn't feel like a GW game. And I wouldn't say this is as
does and
far.
Doesn't.
Right. I mean, of course it does. It's made by, and it's D6s and this is the same way as you said, it's phases and you work through the phases and that's a turn and that's it. So there's those familiar things, but also, I mean, how many years is the debate of like every time a new edition of 40K drops, are we going to alternating activations? The answer is no, we're not.
Right.
Here you are, you are, and you get to see all of it. And it's well done because it has answers for the Achilles heel of alternating activations, which is misalignment of units. The new models,
and the game's better for it.
Yeah. And the models are great. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, if the models didn't excite me, I wouldn't be here.
They're shockingly good.
Yeah.
Like I really didn't want to do this game. I'm so mad at you and Sky and Jody. The fact that here's the other
darn friends wanting to have fun with me.
Here's the other thing I'd throw in there.
We have 10 of us immediately excited to play this game.
How many people have been like, I want to get into Adeptus Titanicus, but nobody in my area plays it?
Yeah.
This is a game where I'd be like, if you don't have somebody to play it with, contrary to your point earlier, Jody, where you kind of fostered that group in your early days, if you don't have somebody that's going to play this with you, I would kind of recommend don't get into it. Like, I don't think, to your point, Josh, when you got into 40K, you were like, well, I stopped doing Epic because there was a bigger pool of people to play with. And that's one of the main reasons I chose Warhammer 40,000 over anything else, because I knew it had the biggest group. I could always find somebody to play with. If I needed to find somebody to play with, it wasn't going to be an issue. I have bought games that I have then not had other people to play with, and it's a sad time, and you're like, okay, well, shoot, So that is one of the reasons I got sucked into it too. Is like, all right, everybody's doing it. I guess I'll do it.
We got it.
If everybody was jumping off a bridge, Carl, would you jump off a bridge? Well, apparently the answer is yes.
If they're jumping in for Legions Imperialis, absolutely.
Are there miniatures at the bottom?
Are they riding on a Titan?
And I hate to agree with that, because I want to tell everybody to go play this game right now. But if
Talk to your group, get your group involved in it before you make an investment.
If it were a true 2-player starter box,
that would be different.
I would have a totally different opinion.
I agree with you.
I would go, no, you're wrong, and here's why. But the fact that you're gonna have to do some finessing to get that
you and your buddy are not going to split this box and be done with it.
Yeah.
If you get two and do a trade in there, one person's going solar, one person's going Marines. That is a great way. That is the best way to use this box.
That is an investment in money.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have everything you need right there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Other than terrain. And you're going to need terrain. You can get by without this. I think you can play this and have a very satisfying experience without the structures, but you will need the area terrains to have an interesting battle on. The buildings add a ton of fun.
This
but
is
there's
not
also
a Planet Bowling Ball game.
No. And there are only so many guns though that can knock down buildings. So even that, like out of the starter set, the Malkador I think is the only tank in there that can actually hurt a building. But the infantry can still do their cool stuff. So yeah, I think that's fair that if nobody in your area is showing some zing for it, that I don't know that I would rush out and grab one of these starters
to try
and get people excited about it. But doggone it, the rules are good.
Go to a convention, see it played. Maybe have somebody walk you through it and your friends through it and try to get you involved. Go to a local GW store if you have one and see if they can walk you through it if they have it available. Yeah. Like I think that's kind of your starting point. Like if you want to generate excitement and then get people playing on it. I'm in, obviously. Stupid Josh.
Begrudgingly.
Yes. But I'm going to love it.
Yeah.
Darn, I
love Titanicus.
Just wait.
Like, it's so fun. So I feel like Games Workshop's coming full circle. Like,
how do you mean?
What's old is new again. We talked about that at kind of the beginning. They've come out with this. I swear they're going to come out with Battlefleet Gothic.
Old World is re-released now, so Battlefleet Gothic's kind of the last thing there.
I'm sure it's on their little check.
Gorka Morka's already been absorbed into the Ash Waste with Necromunda.
Yep. So I mean, I think I don't think that's a bad thing, but it's and while they do this, they also deliver new experiences. Warcry is a very different experience.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating to see it kind of come full circle. But I think they're also in a smarter place. Like they're not like, this is not one of their main game lines. The differentiation between the main studio and the specialist games group is very interesting. And it's smart that they do that. Like it gives you a sense of like, here's the line of demarcation. You're in the pool, but if you want to go into the diving pool, it's over here. Yeah. And there's the people jumping off the 30-foot, diving boards.
The deep dive.
I would say this is a really successful nostalgia hit.
Yeah.
Like I can't, there's no way I know what color my kettle is enough to go like, there is some nostalgia at play here.
Sure, of course.
Big time.
I don't have that.
Right.
But I am very excited about it.
Yeah. And I think that I'm actually curious and probably is more of why I was immediately excited for it while Jody was immediately excited for it. And you were like, maybe not.
I agree.
Was from the nostalgia hit, but the game actually delivers on all cylinders for
I hate that fact too.
Yeah. And I mean, the fact that you have liked Drop Zone Commander and those other fleet games, this is such a strange modern rule design from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But that's what I mean when I say it's like nostalgia done right. It's not nostalgia for the sake of nostalgia. Every time they release a proper squat model, I'm like, neat. And then I groan a little bit because I'm like, oh, that's a cool model. Is it only existing because squats?
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, I mean, neat, good. It's a cool model, but
I think some people love it.
yeah, and they do. And I'm glad. It's just, there's like a bittersweet to it always for me of like, but is this just like lip fan service?
This is not fan service.
Yeah.
This is
Clearly somebody loves the game.
right.
Yeah.
And it's representative, and maybe that's why I feel better about it. It's representative of the direction that when the game went dead, the community kept it going. Mm-hmm. And what we see here is GW going, let's respect that, polish this up, and continue it.
And this game will be supported way more than 6 months that Epic 40,000 was, for example. Like that, it's got legs.
Just their delays will get us there.
Right. It already is. We already know what's coming in the next release too, which is a campaign system,
of course,
a bunch of new units, formations, etc. So the game's going to keep growing and evolving.
Bastion flavored dreadnoughts.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Anything else you want to throw out there?
Game's good.
It's a great game.
I missed that.
if you got the community, definitely get into it. If you have a handful of you that are interested in checking it out, do so in whatever way you can, whether it's watching somebody else's game, going to an event. I'll say
there's going to be some there's battle report on the Warhammer channel. It's worth checking out.
Yeah. You know, even the White Dwarf article was pretty interesting to read about this. Again, this is like most specialist games, it's way more fun to drive these things because, again, all those tactical decisions that are happening, it's more fun if you're the person who has the agency to see that happen than it is to watch it. So I wouldn't judge it necessarily on just how it looked from watching a game, but I think you're going to get a good vibe of how it's going to play.
I think that's a totally fair point, that just watching it played isn't the same as making the placing the order choices.
Yeah.
Just realized, dude, sorry, this is very quick. I came to Space Marine because of White Dwarf.
Oh, really?
I was reading White Dwarf about something else and read a battle report, and it was talking about how the orders, and I was like, that sounds kind of cool. This looks kind of neat.
Yeah.
And like the scale was kind of fun, and then like talked about, and the way it was described was like, and you could see at that time, it wasn't photos of miniatures on the battle map. It was a keyed battle map.
Right. You
know?
Yep.
And I was like, you could see it happening the way they were describing it in a way that 40K doesn't feel that way.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was like, it seems kind of, and that's what got me to go down to the shop and read about it. And
you know what's interesting
that's
about
so
that?
funny.
Like just as a tangent on that real quick, how they would show those, like you could see how you were saying they would show you colors and arrows pointing like, okay, he's coming over here and he's coming over here. I'm not a huge fan of American football. Like my wife is. She's a huge Denver Broncos fan. And I always joke because in Ted Lasso, he called them the garbage ass team. And so now
as a Raiders fan,
they are. And so I always call them that. But anyway, I went to a 49ers game, and just for context, I had not been to a professional football game in many years. The last time I saw a professional football game, and I did see the 49ers last time I saw them play the Chicago Bears, O.J. Simpson was on the 49ers. That was the last professional football game I went to. But what was interesting was I sat behind, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I sat behind one of the field goal positions. And for the first time ever, like on TV, you don't really see it. But like I could see, and this just reminded me from your thing, I could see like the whole line shift. Like directions. Like I didn't ever really conceive. I'm like, why are these idiots running up the middle again? Like it never seems to work. And then when you see it from kind of the behind the angle, like you could see the
see where the
offensive plane, the offensive line, like push open to try to push open a hole or push the whole defensive line to the left or to the right. And I was like, after I'm 52 watching this, and I'm like, oh. I finally get, like, I never played football. Right. I don't know. But I think it's fascinating that you could get that from a White Dwarf and look at, here's how they're going. Right. A lot of times when I see battle reports, it's like, especially video battle reports, it's like, well, these guys charge these guys. You're like, okay, but what's the bigger, tactic here? What's the bigger strategy? What are you trying to do? And in those battle reports, you could see, this guy's flanking around here. This guy's flanking around here. These guys are pushing and holding this unit up while this unit does this. It's like, it's interesting.
Epic so naturally lends itself to thinking about and playing that way.
Yeah.
That you are thinking in terms of flank moves and battle lines.
And you talked about that at the beginning.
Right. And wow, it's such a weird like nostalgia dopamine shock right there of like, I can tell you which armies fought. Like I don't know which issue of White Dwarf it is, but if I saw the battle report, I'd be like, that's the one. Mm-hmm. And it was that discussion and being like caught up in the narrative of it was so satisfying.
Yeah.
And seeing that unfold that, again, 40K is just a different story. It's
for sure.
It's the two heroes punching each other. It's the guardsmen making the noble stand against the squad of chaos
Without
marines.
a doubt.
And
Right.
that's not this game. There is no that guardsman made a noble stand despite your invincible guy.
I did have one guy who would not die.
Well, 5 guys.
Yeah. Five brave Marines refused to die until they did.
That's all it takes.
Yeah.
All right. I think we'll go ahead and end it there because we've gone on long enough. Until next, look, we got Facebook page, Facebook group, we got Discord channel, we got leave us reviews on iTunes, we got a Patreon, that helps us provide content and helps keep Josh and I eating at the moment. It's all great stuff. Gives you access to a bunch of other stuff. You can read all about it on our website. And so I'll just end it with that. Until next time, this is Carl.
This is Josh.
This is Jody.
And we're coming to you from the Astronomicon where Titanic things come in small packages.
Where epic battles await us all.
This place is a lot bigger than I remember.
We'll see you next time.
This episode of The Independent Characters is protected by the Creative Commons license. If you have further questions as to its use, you can find information on the front page at theindependentcharacters.com.